Hello friend, this is our Tell, and here we create the amazing fan fiction stories where small changes can rewrite the whole story. You already know that. If you enjoy this kind of story, so must subscribe the channel for new upcoming videos.
Yo, what's up everyone? It's Hogwarts Tales, and today we're checking out Daphne Greengrass was cursed to die unless she found her soulmate. Her magic chose Harry Potter. Drop a like if you're hyped. Subscribe for daily content. Let's get this story started. Chapter 1, The Ice Queen's Secret. The Great Hall smelled like September. That was the thing Harry couldn't quite get past, how everything smelled exactly the same. Fresh parchment and candle wax and the faintly sweet undertone of whatever enchantment kept the ceiling reflecting the sky above. 4 months ago, he'd watched Voldemort's body crumple on these stones. Now the stones were polished, the walls repaired, the windows replaced, and breakfast was being served as though none of it had happened. He pushed a sausage across his plate. "You going to eat that, or just escort it around?" Ron said through a mouthful of eggs. "Thinking about it." "Don't think. Eat. It's sausage, not a moral dilemma." Hermione turned a page of the Daily Prophet without looking up. "Leave him alone, Ron. I'm not doing anything. I'm encouraging nutrition." Harry almost smiled. Almost. The muscles knew what to do, they'd done it for years, but the signal seemed to get lost somewhere between his brain and his face. He picked up the sausage and bit into it to stop the conversation from going where it always went. The careful glances. The way Hermione's voice softened into that particular frequency that meant she was worried. The way Ron filled silences with noise, because silence was where grief lived. 8th year. That's what they were calling it. A handful of returning students who'd missed their 7th year to war, to hiding, to death. McGonagall had offered them all a place back, and Harry had said yes because he couldn't think of a reason to say no. That was how most of his decisions worked now. Not desire. Not purpose. Just the absence of a better option. He glanced down the Gryffindor table. Neville was laughing at something Seamus had said, his face open and easy in a way that still surprised Harry. The war had carved Neville into something sharper, but it hadn't taken the warmth out of him. Harry envied that more than he'd ever admit. Across the hall, at the Slytherin table, the 8th years were a smaller group. Malfoy sat at the far end, eating with mechanical precision and talking to no one. Blaise Zabini was holding court with 2 5th years who looked impressed by whatever he was saying. Tracy Davis was leaning across the table, whispering something to Daphne Greengrass. Harry's eyes passed over her the way they always had, briefly, without purchase. She was one of those people who existed in the periphery of his Hogwarts experience, a name on a class list, a face in a corridor. Blonde hair pulled back, posture so straight it looked like she'd been carved from marble. The Ice Queen, people called her, though Harry had never cared enough to wonder why. She was looking at her plate the same way he'd been looking at his. Not eating. Not performing appetite. Just sitting there, contained and still, while Tracy talked at her. "Double potions first," Hermione said, folding the paper. "Slughorn's doing combined classes this year. All 4 houses." Ron groaned. "Brilliant. Nothing like starting the morning watching Malfoy sneer at my cauldron. He's been perfectly civil." "Yeah, that's what's wrong. Civil Malfoy is worse than regular Malfoy. At least regular Malfoy I knew how to handle." Harry stood up. "Let's just go." They both looked at him, that look again, the careful one, and then they stood too, and the 3 of them walked out of the Great Hall together, same as always, same as before, as if anything was the same at all. The dungeons were cool and dim, and Harry took a seat near the back without thinking about it. He'd spent 6 years trying to avoid Snape's attention in this room. Snape was dead now. Slughorn was fine, jovial, harmless, a little too interested in collecting people. But the habit of making himself small in potions class had calcified into something permanent. Ron dropped into the seat beside him. Hermione took the bench in front, already pulling out her textbook. The room filled slowly, Gryffindors, Hufflepuffs, Ravenclaws, Slytherins, all mixed together in a way that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. McGonagall's doing unity and healing, she'd said. House divisions had cost them too much. Daphne Greengrass walked in with Tracy Davis and took a seat 3 rows ahead of Harry, on the left. She set up her workspace with precise, economical movements, cauldron-centered, ingredients arranged by order of use, knife laid parallel to the cutting board. Everything exact. Everything controlled. Tracy leaned over and said something. Daphne shook her head once, barely a movement at all. Right then. Slughorn bustled in, belly first, his walrus mustache twitching with enthusiasm. Welcome, welcome, what a fine group we have. NEWT level, combined houses, marvelous. Today we're brewing Draft of Living Death. You've all attempted it before, so let's see how you've grown. Best brew gets a little something special. I've got a lovely bottle of Felix Felicis that's simply dying for a new owner. A murmur went through the room. Harry felt nothing. He'd won that prize once, in 6th year, using a dead man's handwriting. The memory sat in his chest like a stone. Off you go. Instructions are on page 10. You have 90 minutes. The room dissolved into the familiar sounds of potions class, chopping, stirring, the low mutter of students reading instructions aloud. Harry opened his textbook and stared at the page. The words were there. He knew what they meant. His hands began working, slicing saprophyros beans, measuring powdered root of asphodel, while the rest of him floated somewhere above, watching. Ron was already struggling. How are you supposed to cut this? It's like trying to slice a rubber ball. Crush it with the flat of your blade, Hermione said without turning around. I know that. I was going to do that. Then why did you ask? Harry crushed the bean. Juice splattered across his cutting board. He wiped his hand on his robes and added it to the cauldron, watching the potion turn the exact shade of lilac the textbook described. Good. Fine. Another thing done correctly that meant nothing. 20 minutes in, he noticed it. Daphne Greengrass's hand was shaking. It was subtle, barely visible from 3 rows back, but Harry's eyes had spent 7 years trained on the details that didn't fit. The small things that meant danger. And Daphne Greengrass, whose hands had been surgeon steady 5 minutes ago, was trembling over her cauldron like she was standing in a wind only she could feel. She put the knife down. Pressed her palm flat against the desk. Held it there, fingers white at the tips, and after a moment the trembling stopped. She picked the knife back up and kept cutting. Nobody else had noticed. Tracy was focused on her own cauldron. Slughorn was praising Hermione's stirring technique. The room went on. Harry went back to his potion. 40 minutes. The classroom was warm now, steam rising from 24 cauldrons, the air thick and sweet and slightly narcotic. Harry's draft was turning the right shade of blackcurrant. He stirred counterclockwise, counted to 7, stirred clockwise once. A sound cut through the room. It was small, barely more than a caught breath, but it was the kind of sound that Harry's body recognized before his brain did. The sound of someone trying very hard not to scream. He looked up. Daphne was gripping the edge of her desk with both hands. Her potion was forgotten, bubbling unattended. Her face, that perfect, composed, marble-carved face, had gone the color of old parchment, and there was something happening beneath her skin. Not visible, exactly. More like the way the air shimmers above hot pavement. A distortion. A wrongness. Tracy turned. Daphne, what? Daphne's mouth opened. No sound came out. Her eyes were wide and glassy and fixed on something no one else could see, and her hands on the desk were shaking so hard the cauldron was rattling. Professor. Tracy's voice cracked across the room. Professor, something's wrong, Slughorn turned, his smile collapsing. Miss Greengrass? My dear girl, are you? Daphne's knees buckled. She didn't fall gracefully. People don't, when their body stops cooperating. She went down hard, catching the edge of the desk, sending her cauldron crashing to the floor in a splash of half-brewed potion, and then she was on the stone, and the distortion Harry had barely seen was suddenly everywhere. Magic. Raw magic, pouring off her like heat from a furnace, visible as pale gold light that rippled across the floor and climbed the walls. Not a spell. Not anything controlled or directed. This was magic tearing itself free of a body that couldn't contain it anymore, and it was wrong, fractured, jagged, like light through broken glass. Students scrambled backward. Chairs scraped. Someone yelped as a wave of energy shattered 3 cauldrons at once. Slughorn had his wand out, trying to cast something, but the magic rolling off Daphne wasn't letting anything through. It batted his spell aside like a hand swatting a fly. Everyone back. Slughorn shouted. Back, all of you. Harry was on his feet. He didn't remember standing. The gold light was expanding, pulsing in time with something, a heartbeat, he realized. Her heartbeat. And it was fast. Too fast. Stuttering. Tracy was on her knees beside Daphne, trying to hold her, and the magic wasn't hurting her, it seemed to recognize her, flowing around her like water around a stone, but Tracy's face was white with a terror that went deeper than surprise. This wasn't new to her. She'd seen this before. Daphne, listen to me, Tracy was saying, her voice low and fierce. You need to pull it back. Pull it back, Daph, like we practiced, Daphne convulsed. The gold light flared so bright Harry threw up a hand to shield his eyes, and the wave of magic that erupted from her hit every person in the room like a physical force. Students staggered. Glass shattered. The dungeon torches blew out all at once, plunging the room into a darkness lit only by that terrible, beautiful, broken gold light. And then it reached Harry. He felt it hit his chest like a bolt of lightning, not painful, not exactly, but so intense that every nerve in his body fired at once. His vision whited out. His magic surged in response, rising to meet hers without his permission, without his understanding, and somewhere in the collision of her gold light and his, whatever his was, whatever color his magic wore when it was raw, something connected. Like a key turning in a lock. Like a circuit completing. Like 2 frayed ends of the same rope finding each other in the dark. The light exploded outward, then contracted. The magic that had been slamming around the room in wild, destructive waves suddenly pulled inward, focused, organized, and it flowed in a straight line between Daphne Greengrass, crumpled on the dungeon floor, and Harry Potter, standing 3 rows back with his hand pressed to his chest and his eyes blown wide. A tether. Visible for 1 heartbeat, 2, a line of intertwined gold and silver light connecting them across the wrecked classroom, and then it sank beneath the skin and vanished. The torches relit. The room was silent. Harry was breathing hard. His hand was still on his chest, and underneath it, he could feel something. Not pain. A presence. A warmth that hadn't been there before, nestled behind his ribs like a second heartbeat. On the floor, Daphne's eyes were closed. The shaking had stopped. Tracy was holding her, staring at Harry with an expression he couldn't read, fear and hope and something that might have been fury, all tangled together. What, Ron said from somewhere behind him, the bloody hell was that? Slughorn was already moving, wand out, casting diagnostic charms that lit up in complicated patterns Harry didn't recognize. Nobody move. Nobody leave this room. Mr. Finnegan, go to the hospital wing, tell Madame Pomfrey to come immediately. Miss Granger, please ensure no one touches any of the spilled potions. Mr. Potter, Harry was already walking forward. He didn't decide to. His legs just moved, carrying him down the aisle between the wrecked desks, past broken glass and puddles of ruined draft, until he was standing over Daphne Greengrass. Up close, she looked smaller than he'd expected. The composure that made her seem tall and untouchable was gone, and what was left was a girl with dark circles under her eyes and a pulse fluttering visibly in her throat. Her skin was so pale it was nearly translucent, and he could see the faint lines of veins at her temples, and beneath the skin, faint traces of something dark. Like ink in water. Spreading. "Don't touch her," Tracy said sharply. "I wasn't going to. Your magic that thing that happened, don't you dare think that means, Tracy." Daphne's voice was barely a whisper, but it stopped the other girl cold. Her eyes opened. Dark blue, shot through with exhaustion, and when they focused on Harry, something in them shifted. Not warmth. Not gratitude. Recognition. She knew what had happened. Whatever that tether was, she understood it, and the look on her face said she'd rather have died on this floor than have it happen. "Get away from me, Potter." Her voice was thin as paper, but the ice in it could have frozen the lake. "You just collapsed in the middle of class and blew up a dungeon," Harry said. "I'm not the problem here. You're exactly the problem." She tried to sit up and couldn't. Her arms shook and gave out, and Tracy caught her, and the humiliation that flashed across Daphne's face was so raw that Harry looked away. Madame Pomfrey arrived in a whirlwind of starched robes and sharp efficiency. She took one look at Daphne, one look at the destroyed classroom, and her expression went very still. "How long since the last episode?" she asked Tracy. Tracy hesitated. Daphne's eyes were closed again, but her jaw was clenched. 6 weeks, Tracy said quietly. "They're accelerating." It wasn't a question. Tracy nodded. Pomfrey turned to Slughorn. "I need her in the hospital wing. And I need the headmistress." Her eyes moved to Harry and stayed there, and whatever she saw made her press her lips together in a thin, tight line. "Mr. Potter, you'll come as well." "Why?" Ron stepped forward. "Harry didn't do anything." "Whatever that was, it wasn't, Mr. Weasley, I assure you, nobody is in trouble. But Mr. Potter needs to come with me. Now." Daphne was levitated out of the classroom on a conjured stretcher, Tracy walking beside her like a guard dog, one hand on Daphne's arm. Harry followed, and he could feel the eyes of every student in the room on his back, curious, frightened, hungry for something to whisper about. Some things never changed. The hospital wing was quiet. Pomfrey settled Daphne into a bed with practiced efficiency, drawing curtains around her and casting a flurry of diagnostic spells that painted the air in shifting colors. Harry stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, trying to make sense of the warmth behind his ribs that pulsed in time with Daphne's breathing. Because it did. He was sure of that now. Whatever she breathed in, his chest expanded. Whatever she breathed out, his chest settled. They were synchronized in some fundamental way that hadn't existed an hour ago. "Sit down, Potter," Tracy said. "You're looming." He sat in a wooden chair by the window and waited. McGonagall arrived 12 minutes later. He knew because he counted. She swept into the hospital wing with her tartan robes billowing and her expression set in the particular configuration that meant someone was about to get the truth whether they wanted it or not. "Poppy. Report." Pomfrey glanced at Daphne, who had pulled herself upright against the pillows. Still pale. Still that darkness moving under her skin. But conscious, composed, the mask back in place, cracked, but holding. "Miss Greengrass's condition has advanced significantly since June," Pomfrey said. "The curse is progressing faster than our models predicted. The episode today was a stage 3 destabilization. And the connection to Mr. Potter?" Silence. Daphne spoke. "There is no connection to Potter." "Miss Greengrass," McGonagall said, and her voice was gentle in a way that Harry had rarely heard from her, "I have been aware of your family's situation since your father first wrote to Dumbledore in your second year. I know what the curse is. I know what a soul bond looks like. And I watched the memory Horace provided of what happened in that classroom. So I will ask again, the connection to Mr. Potter?" Daphne said nothing. Her hands were fists in the bedsheets, knuckles white, and Harry could see the tendons in her wrists standing out like cables. Whatever she was feeling, it was enormous, and every ounce of her energy was going into not showing it. Her magic chose him, Tracy said quietly. Daphne's head snapped toward her, betrayal burning in her eyes. Daph, she already knows. There's no point. There's every point. This is mine. My curse, my problem, and now it's his too, and you don't get to pretend it isn't. Harry held up a hand. Someone want to tell me what's happening? Because from where I'm sitting, a girl I've never spoken to in 7 years just accidentally tied her magic to mine, and everyone in this room seems to know more about it than I do. McGonagall turned to him. She studied him for a long moment, and something in her face reminded him of the way she'd looked at him in the hours after the battle, not as a student, not as the boy who lived, but as a person she cared about who'd been through too much. The Greengrass family carries a blood malediction, she said. An ancestral curse placed on the eldest daughter of each generation. It weakens the magical core over time, destabilizing it until it kills me, Daphne said flatly. You can say it. I've had the diagnosis since I was 12. Harry stared at her. Since you were 12? Don't look at me like that. Like what? Like I'm something tragic. I wasn't, I was looking at you like you just said something insane. You've known since second year. And I've managed perfectly well without anyone's help, particularly yours. You collapsed in potions and destroyed half the classroom. That's a slight exaggeration. You shattered 14 cauldrons, Tracy said helpfully. Daphne shot her a look that could have stripped paint. McGonagall raised a hand, and the room went quiet. The malediction has one documented countermeasure. When the curse reaches a critical point, the afflicted witch's magic will sometimes, not always, reach out to identify a soul bond. A magical match deep enough and compatible enough to anchor the witch's core and stabilize the curse. The bond, once established, cannot be severed. The words landed in Harry's chest like stones dropped into water. Cannot be severed. He thought of the warmth behind his ribs, the synchronized breathing, the way his feet had carried him to her side without permission. When you say, cannot be severed, I mean exactly that, Mr. Potter. What happened in that classroom was not a spell. It was not a choice. Miss Greengrass's magic identified you as its match, and the bond formed of its own accord. You are, in the parlance of old magical theory, soul-bound. The word hung in the air. Harry looked at Daphne. She was staring at the wall beside his head, refusing to meet his eyes, and the mask on her face was so rigid it looked like it might shatter. I didn't ask for this, she said. Her voice was very quiet. I want you to know that. I didn't ask for this, and I didn't want it, and if I could undo it, I would. Yeah, Harry said. I know the feeling. Something flickered across her face, surprise, maybe, at being met with understanding instead of anger. It vanished quickly. What does the bond actually do? Harry asked. Practically. Pomfrey answered. In the short term, proximity stabilizes her core. Distance worsens the symptoms. How much distance, and how quickly the symptoms return, we'll need to determine through observation. In the long term, she hesitated. In the long term, the bond must be completed through a ritual, McGonagall said. A permanent merging of magical cores that stabilizes the curse indefinitely. Without it, the bond slows the malediction but does not stop it. The curse will still, eventually, run its course. So she'll still die, Harry said. The words came out blunter than he intended. Daphne flinched. Without the completed bond? Yes. In time. How much time? Mr. Potter, how much? My father's healers estimated spring, Daphne said. She said it the way she might have said the library closes at 9. A fact. Just a fact. Maybe summer, if the episode's slow. Spring. It was September. Harry stood up. The chair scraped against the stone floor. He walked to the window and looked out at the grounds, the lake, the forest, the mountains beyond, all golden and green under an autumn sky. Students were walking to their next class. Someone was laughing. "You said there's a ritual," he said without turning around. "What does it require?" "Mr. Potter, we don't need to discuss this now. What does it require?" McGonagall paused. "Our records are incomplete. The last successful completion of such a bond was over 2 centuries ago. Research will be needed. Considerable research." He turned back. Daphne was watching him now, really watching, not with her mask but with something raw and frightened underneath it. She looked away the instant he caught her. "Fine," Harry said. "Then we research. You don't owe me anything, Potter. I know. I don't want your pity." "Good, because you're not getting it. You're getting my help. There's a difference. And if I refuse? Then you die in the spring, and I spend the rest of my life with a dead spot behind my ribs where your heartbeat used to be. That sound like a good plan to you?" The silence that followed was electric. Daphne's eyes were wide, and for just a moment, less than a second, the mask dropped completely, and he saw her. Not the Ice Queen. Not the composed, untouchable Slytherin. A girl who was terrified and exhausted and so tired of carrying this alone that the offer of help was almost worse than the curse, because hope was the cruelest thing of all. Then the mask slammed back. "Fine," she said. "But we do this on my terms. Wouldn't dream of anything else." Tracy looked between them with an expression that was halfway between relief and the dawning realization that this was going to be an absolute disaster. McGonagall adjusted her spectacles. "I will arrange modified living quarters. Given the proximity requirements, it would be impractical for you to remain in separate house dormitories. There is a connected suite in the 7th floor corridor." "Absolutely not," Daphne said. "Miss Greengrass, the alternative is the hospital wing on a permanent basis, then the hospital wing." "Daphne." Tracy's voice was careful. "Be practical." "I am being practical. I'm practically explaining that I will not share living quarters with Harry Potter." "Connected suite," McGonagall repeated firmly. "Separate bedrooms, a shared common room. Miss Davis may take the 3rd bedroom if it provides comfort. This is not a negotiation, Miss Greengrass. It is a medical accommodation." Daphne's jaw worked. Harry could feel her anger through the bond, not as a thought, but as a sensation, a heat against his sternum. That was going to take some getting used to. "Fine," she said again. She seemed to be saying that a lot. Pomfrey began running another set of diagnostics, and McGonagall gestured for Harry to follow her into the corridor. He did, and the moment the doors closed behind them, the headmistress's composure shifted. She looked older. Heavier. "I will not pretend this is fair to you, Harry. First name." She only used his first name when things were serious. "It's not fair to her either." "No. It's not. But you have a choice in how you respond, and she doesn't, and that asymmetry is something you'll both need to navigate carefully." She paused. "You should also know that this will not remain quiet. Half the school saw what happened. By tonight, it will be in the papers." Harry almost laughed. "Of course it will. The political dimensions are not insignificant. You are who you are, and the Greengrass family, while neutral during the war, carries old blood and old alliances. There will be those who see this bond as an opportunity. An opportunity for what? Leverage. Influence. Control." McGonagall's eyes were sharp behind her spectacles. "The post-war world is being built right now, Harry. Every faction, every family, every ministry official is jockeying for position. The man who holds sway over Harry Potter's obligations holds sway over a great deal. Nobody holds sway over my obligations. Then make sure of it. Because there are people who will try. She studied him. I've contacted Cyrus Greengrass. He'll arrive this evening. You should meet him. How much does he know? Everything. He's been fighting this curse since before Daphne was born. It's cost him, more than you can imagine. Something passed through her voice that might have been grief. Be patient with him. And be patient with her. She has spent her entire life preparing to die, Harry. You've just taken that certainty away from her, and I suspect she doesn't know what to do with it. She left him standing in the corridor, and the warmth behind his ribs pulsed once, like a heartbeat that wasn't his own. Ron and Hermione caught up to him outside the library that afternoon. He'd gone there on instinct, not to research, not yet, but because it was quiet and he needed to think without people staring at him. All right, Ron said, sliding into the chair across from him. We skip charms. Flitwick will forgive us. Talk. Harry told them everything. He'd never been good at keeping things from these two, and he didn't try now. The curse. The bond. The ritual. Spring. Ron leaned back in his chair and blew out a long breath. So you're magically married to the Ice Queen of Slytherin. Not married. Bonded. What's the difference? I don't actually know. Helpful. Hermione had been quiet through the entire explanation, her eyes focused inward in the way that meant she was processing at a speed the rest of them couldn't match. Now she leaned forward. A blood malediction targeting the eldest daughter. That's generational magic. Very old, very specific. It wouldn't have been cast lightly. That kind of curse requires a deliberate anchoring to a bloodline, which means it was placed by someone who understood genealogical magic at an expert level. She was already pulling parchment toward her. Who cursed the Greengrass family? Do we know? McGonagall didn't say. Daphne didn't either. That's the first thing we need to find out. Curses like this, they're not just fire and forget. They're maintained. Something is feeding it. If we can find the source, we... Harry looked at her. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you think you were doing this alone? She raised an eyebrow. Harry, you spent 7 years dragging us into your problems. You don't get to shut us out of this one just because it's a girl. Ron pointed at Hermione. What she said. Also, I'm offended you thought you had to ask. Something loosened in Harry's chest. Not the bond, something older. Something that was just Ron and Hermione, steady as gravity, refusing to let him drift. All right, he said. We find the source. But Daphne won't like our help. Yeah, I've met Slytherins before. Ron shrugged. She'll come around. You don't know her. No. But I know you, and you've never been able to leave someone in trouble. Even when they're awful about it. He grinned. Especially then. Cyrus Greengrass arrived at Hogwarts as the sun was setting, and Harry could tell within 10 seconds that the man was dying. Not obviously. Not dramatically. He walked through the entrance hall under his own power, dressed in well-cut robes of dark gray, his blonde hair, the same shade as Daphne's, swept back from a face that must have been handsome once. But his skin had that same translucent quality Harry had noticed in Daphne, and his hands, when he shook Harry's, trembled with a fine, constant vibration that no amount of composure could hide. Mr. Potter. His voice was steady. That cost him, Harry could see the effort. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Mr. Greengrass. They were in McGonagall's office. The headmistress had stepped out to give them privacy, and the portraits on the walls were conspicuously pretending to sleep. Dumbledore's frame was empty. Harry didn't know where the painted version of his mentor went when he wasn't dispensing wisdom, and he tried not to think about it. Cyrus sat down carefully, as if his bones weren't certain they could hold him. I won't waste your time with pleasantries. You know what's happening to my daughter. I know she's cursed. I know the bond can slow it down. I know there's a ritual that might stop it. And you know she'd rather die than accept help she hasn't earned. A ghost of a smile. She gets that from her mother. Her mother died when Daphne was 7. The same curse. First daughter of her generation. He said it simply, without self-pity, but his eyes were very far away for a moment. I spent 11 years trying to find a cure. I've consulted every healer, every cursebreaker, every dark art specialist in Europe. The answer is always the same: the malediction cannot be broken from the outside. It can only be anchored from within, through the soul bond. And if the bond isn't completed? Then my daughter dies, and in 25 or 30 years, if Astoria has a daughter, it begins again. The weight of that settled over the room like snowfall. Mr. Greengrass, Harry said carefully, McGonagall said the bond ritual requires research. She said the records are incomplete. They are. The last completed bond was in 1743. The Greengrass archives have fragments, descriptions, requirements, constraints, but not a complete ritual framework. My family has been searching for generations. He paused. The problem is not finding the ritual. The problem is that the ritual demands a willing sacrifice of magical power. Not a token offering. A permanent merging, your core and hers, fused at the deepest level. You would gain her strengths. She would gain yours. Neither of you would ever be fully independent again. Harry let that sink in. My daughter will not ask this of you, Cyrus said. She would die first. That is not hyperbole. I know. Then you also know that the decision must be yours, freely made, and that it cannot be made lightly. I did not come here to pressure you, Mr. Potter. I came to give you information, and to see for myself the person my daughter's magic chose. He studied Harry the way McGonagall had, not the surface, but something deeper. I confess, I did not expect you. Who did you expect? No one. I'd given up expecting anyone. The bond is rare. Most afflicted Greengrass women never find their match. My wife didn't. His voice didn't waver, but something behind his eyes cracked. Daphne has known since she was 12 that she would likely die as her mother did. She built her entire life around that certainty. Every choice, every friendship, every wall she put up, all of it designed to make her death hurt as few people as possible. He leaned forward. And now you're here, and that certainty is gone, and I suspect she's more frightened than she's ever been. Not of dying. Of hoping. Harry thought of the look on her face in the hospital wing. The mask dropping. The terror underneath. I'm not going to let her die, he said. Cyrus Greengrass looked at him for a long time. Then he nodded, once, and some of the tension in his shoulders released. Then you should know everything. The curse was placed on our family in 1412 by a wizard named Aldrich Selwyn. The Selwyns and the Greengrasses were rivals, land, influence, the usual pure-blood games. Aldrich lost a duel to my ancestor and responded with the malediction. It's blood-anchored, passed through the maternal line, and according to my research, each death feeds something. The curse doesn't just kill, it transfers the victim's magical energy somewhere. I've never been able to determine where. Selwyn, Harry repeated. Any relation to the current Selwyns? Marcus Selwyn. Deputy Director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Rising star of the post-war ministry. Cyrus's expression hardened. He's been making overtures toward the Greengrass estate for months. Guardianship proposals, financial partnerships, protective arrangements. All very civilized. All very insistent. You think he knows about the curse? I think the Selwyns have always known about the curse. I think they've been profiting from it for 6 centuries. And I think Marcus Selwyn is very, very interested in what happens when a soul bond forms, because a bond that connects to Harry Potter is not just a medical event. It's a political weapon. The torches in McGonagall's office flickered. Harry felt the warmth behind his ribs pulse, and this time, he recognized the emotion bleeding through Daphne, somewhere in the castle, afraid. "I need to talk to her," Harry said, standing. "She won't make it easy. Nothing ever is." He found her in the 7th-floor corridor, outside the suite McGonagall had arranged. She was standing at the window, looking out at the grounds, and the moonlight made her hair silver white and her skin look like porcelain over shadows. Tracy was nowhere in sight. She heard him coming, he wasn't trying to be quiet, and turned. Whatever vulnerability he'd seen in the hospital wing was gone. She was armored again, composed, the Ice Queen in full regalia. "You spoke with my father," she said. "Not a question. He told me about the Selwyns." A flicker of something, surprise, maybe, that her father had shared that much. "Then you know this is bigger than a school medical issue. I know someone's been profiting from your family's curse for 600 years, and the current beneficiary works at the ministry." "Yeah. I know." She turned back to the window. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Harry could feel her through the bond, the steady, controlled pulse of her magic, the tight grip she kept on her emotions, and underneath it, like a drumbeat beneath music, the curse. Dark and slow and patient. "I need you to understand something, Potter," she said to the glass. "I've known I was going to die since I was 12 years old. I watched my mother die of this when I was 7. I held her hand while the curse ate her magic alive, and I knew, even then, even before the healers confirmed it, that the same thing was going to happen to me." She paused. "I made peace with it. I built a life around it. And now your magic is tangled up in mine, and everything I'd accepted is uncertain. And I don't do well with uncertainty. Nobody does. You seem to manage." Harry almost laughed. "I really don't. I just keep moving forward and hope the ground is still there when my foot comes down." She turned her head slightly. Not quite looking at him. "Is that supposed to be comforting?" "It's supposed to be honest. I don't know what I'm doing, Greengrass. I never have. But I've got a pretty good track record of figuring things out as I go, and I've got friends who are smarter than me, and I'm not going to let you die because you're too proud to let someone help you. Pride has nothing to do with it." "Then what?" She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "What if it doesn't work? What if we do the research and find the ritual and try to complete it, and it fails? What if you give up your magical independence for nothing, and I die anyway?" She turned to face him fully, and her eyes were bright with something she was refusing to let become tears. "I can handle my own death, Potter. I've had years to prepare for it. What I cannot handle is being responsible for destroying someone else's life on the way out." The bond pulsed between them, her fear, his stubbornness, tangled together in the space behind his ribs. He took a step closer. She didn't step back. "My life was pretty much destroyed already," he said. "War saw to that. So you're not risking much. Don't diminish yourself to make me feel better." "I'm not. I'm being honest. I came back to Hogwarts because I couldn't think of anywhere else to go. I eat breakfast and go to class and stare at the ceiling at night and wait for something to matter again. And this," he gestured between them. "Whatever this is, it's the first thing since May that's made me feel anything at all. So maybe you're saving me as much as I'm saving you. Ever think of that?" She stared at him. The mask wavered. "You're very strange, Potter. I've been told. I don't like you. You don't know me. I know enough. You know the prophet version. The boy who lived version. You don't know a damn thing about me, and I don't know anything about you, and maybe that's fine. Maybe we start from scratch. No houses, no history, no expectations. Just two people who are stuck with each other trying not to die." The corner of her mouth twitched. Not a smile. Not quite. But the ghost of one, the possibility of one, and it transformed her face in a way that caught him off guard. Trying not to die, she repeated. What a foundation for a relationship. Worked for my last few friendships. This time, she did almost smile. It vanished quickly, but it had been there. Fine, Potter. From scratch. She held out her hand. Her fingers were slim and cool and still faintly trembling. Daphne Greengrass. Slytherin. Cursed. Terrible at asking for help. He took her hand. The bond sang between them, a warmth, a recognition, a settling of something that had been restless. Harry Potter. Gryffindor. Chronically incapable of minding my own business. Yes, she said dryly. I'd noticed. They stood there in the moonlit corridor, hands clasped, the bond humming softly between them, and for the first time since September, the castle felt like something other than a monument to everything Harry had lost. It felt like a beginning. Far away, in a ministry office high above the streets of London, Marcus Selwyn set down the evening edition of the Daily Prophet. The headline screamed across the front page in bold type, Soulmate spectacle at Hogwarts, Harry Potter connected to Greengrass heiress. He read the article twice. Then he leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers, and in the lamplight, his expression was the patient, calculated stillness of a man who had been waiting for exactly this. He opened a drawer. Inside was a small, ornate box, very old, carved with runes that pulsed faintly with a dark, rhythmic light. The light matched a heartbeat. It had always matched a heartbeat. It was beating faster now. Selwyn closed the drawer, picked up a quill, and began to write a letter. Dear Cyrus, it began. I was so sorry to hear about Daphne's episode at school. Please know that the Selwyn family stands ready to assist the Greengrasses in any way we can during this difficult time. He signed his name with a flourish, sealed the letter with green wax, and sent it into the night. Chapter 2, Unwilling Allies. The shared suite on the 7th floor was nicer than anything Harry had lived in at Hogwarts. That was the first problem. 2 bedrooms flanked a central common room that was half the size of the Gryffindor one but furnished with the kind of quiet taste that suggested McGonagall had asked the house elves to make an effort. Deep green and warm gold fabrics. Bookshelves along one wall, already stocked. A fireplace that crackled without being lit. A third, smaller bedroom off to the side for Tracy. Harry dropped his trunk at the foot of his bed and stared at the ceiling. Through the wall, thin enough to hear movement, thick enough to muffle words, he could hear Daphne and Tracy unpacking. The low murmur of Tracy's voice. Silence from Daphne. The bond hummed. Closer now, the warmth steadier, like sitting near a fire after being out in the cold. He pressed his hand to his chest and felt the double heartbeat, his and hers, not quite in sync, but close. Closer than yesterday. He'd slept badly. Not because of nightmares, those had faded to a dull background static over the summer, but because his body kept startling awake at odd hours, reaching for something it couldn't name. At 3 in the morning, he'd lain in the dark and felt Daphne's pulse spike, then settle, spike, then settle, and he'd known she wasn't sleeping either. A knock on his door. Potter. Tracy's voice. Breakfast. She won't go without you, and she won't admit she won't go without you, so I'm telling you instead. He opened the door. Tracy Davis stood in the common room with her arms crossed and an expression that said she'd already had a long morning. She was shorter than Daphne, darker, with sharp brown eyes and the kind of face that defaulted to skepticism. How far can she get from me before it starts? He asked. We tested it last night while you were asleep. About 40 feet before she gets shaky. 60 before the pain starts. We didn't push past that. She tested it without telling me. She tests everything without telling anyone. It's her favorite hobby, right after suffering in silence and alphabetizing her notes. Tracy paused. Look, Potter. I've been her best friend since first year. I'm the only person she told about the curse voluntarily. And I'm telling you now, she's going to fight you every step of the way. Not because she doesn't need your help. Because needing help is the thing that scares her most. More than dying. Dying is just the ending. Needing someone, that's vulnerability. And vulnerability is what killed her mother. Tracy's voice softened for half a second, then hardened again. So be patient. But not too patient. She'll mistake patience for pity, and then you'll really have a problem. The door to Daphne's room opened. She emerged dressed and composed, her hair pulled into a low knot, robes perfectly pressed. She looked like she'd slept 12 hours and meditated at dawn. Harry knew she'd been awake at 3 in the morning with a racing heart. "Morning," he said. "Potter." She picked up her bag from the armchair. "Shall we?" They walked to the great hall together, and every single person in the corridor stared. Harry was used to stares. He'd been stared at since he was 11, the scar, the stories, the spectacle of being Harry Potter in a world that couldn't decide if he was a hero or a headline. He'd learned to let it slide off him like rain. Daphne, he noticed, handled it differently. She didn't ignore the stares. She froze them. Her spine went straighter, her chin lifted a fraction, and something in her expression became so perfectly, immaculately blank that looking at her felt like looking at a closed door. The student's eyes would land on her, find nothing to grip, and slide away. It was impressive. It was also, Harry was beginning to understand, exhausting. They entered the great hall and the noise dipped, not to silence, but to that particular murmur that meant everyone was talking about the same thing and trying to pretend they weren't. Harry walked toward the Gryffindor table by habit, then stopped. "Where do you usually sit?" "Slytherin table," Daphne said. "Obviously." "Right. And I sit at Gryffindor." "So, 40 feet?" They both looked across the hall. The Gryffindor and Slytherin tables were on opposite sides. Easily 80 feet apart. "Ah," Daphne said. "Yeah. This is going to be a problem." They compromised by sitting at the end of the Hufflepuff table, which was roughly equidistant from both their usual spots and had the advantage of being near the doors. Tracy dropped onto the bench beside Daphne without comment. Ron and Hermione, after a brief conference conducted entirely through eyebrow movements, came and sat across from them. "Weasley." "Granger," Daphne said, with the careful neutrality of someone acknowledging foreign diplomats. "Greengrass," Hermione said, matching her tone exactly. Ron just nodded and reached for the bacon. "So this is us now. Hufflepuff table gang." "Temporarily," Daphne said. "Right. Temporarily." Ron glanced at Harry. Harry shrugged. Ron piled his plate high and started eating, because Ron's approach to uncomfortable situations was and had always been carbohydrates. Breakfast was awkward. Not hostile, Daphne was too controlled for hostility and Hermione too diplomatic, but awkward in the way that 5 people who don't know the rules of their new arrangement are awkward. Tracy carried most of the conversation, chatting with Hermione about their ancient runes reading with a familiarity that surprised Harry. Daphne ate small, precise bites of toast and said nothing. Harry drank his tea and watched her not look at him. The bond pulsed gently between them. Her magic was steadier this morning, he could feel the difference. Closer to him, it smoothed out, the jagged edges softening into something almost calm. He wondered if she could feel the difference too, and if she resented it. Probably. The post owls arrived in a flurry of wings and dropped letters. An official-looking scroll landed in front of Daphne, sealed with dark wax. She picked it up, broke the seal, read 3 lines, and her face went very still. "Everything all right?" Tracy asked. Daphne folded the letter and put it in her bag. "Fine." She was lying. Harry could feel it through the bond, a spike of cold fury, tightly contained, like a fist clenching around ice. He didn't push. He filed it away. Hermione got a letter too, from the ministry, by the look of the seal. She read it with a frown that deepened as she went. Harry, have you heard of Marcus Selwyn? Daphne's head turned sharply. Name came up yesterday, Harry said. Why? He's been appointed to a new oversight committee. The Committee for Post-War Magical Heritage Preservation. It's ostensibly about protecting old wizarding families and estates during Reconstruction. But look at the charter. She slid the letter across the table. Subsection 4 gives the committee authority to appoint guardians for magical families deemed at risk of dissolution. And guess whose name is on the first list of families under review? Harry read the relevant passage. Then he read it again. Then he looked at Daphne. You knew, he said. My father received a similar letter last week. Her voice was ice. Selwyn has been circling our estate for months. The guardianship proposal is his newest angle. If the committee declares the Greengrass family unable to manage its own affairs, which, given my father's declining health and my own condition, they easily could, Selwyn gains legal authority over our properties, our vaults, our political alliances. And over you, Tracy said quietly. Yes. And over me. Ron had stopped eating, which was how Harry knew the situation was serious. Can he do that? Just, take over a family? Post-war emergency powers, Hermione said, and her voice had that particular edge it got when she'd identified an injustice. The Wisengamot passed sweeping authority acts after the battle. Most of them were necessary, rebuilding infrastructure, rehabilitating compromised institutions. But some of the provisions are dangerously broad. A committee with the right mandate could absolutely claim guardianship over a vulnerable pure-blood house. I am not vulnerable, Daphne said. You collapsed in potions and formed an involuntary soul bond, Hermione said, not unkindly. In the eyes of the committee, that's textbook vulnerability. Daphne's expression could have etched glass. But she didn't argue, because she couldn't, and Harry watched her swallow the humiliation of that with the same rigid control she applied to everything else. We need to fight this, Harry said. The guardianship play. We can't just let him, we need to be strategic about it, Daphne cut in. Selwyn is not a brute. He won't make a move that looks aggressive. Everything he does will be framed as concern, as protection, as helping. If we attack him publicly, we look paranoid and he looks reasonable. She's right, Hermione said. We need to understand his position before we counter it. I want to see the full committee charter and the legal precedents they're operating under. I can get those, Daphne said. She and Hermione looked at each other, and something passed between them, a recognition. Two sharp minds finding common ground. My father has contacts in the Wisengamot Records office. Good. I'll cross-reference with the emergency powers legislation. All right, Ron said. So Hermione and Greengrass handle the legal bit. What do the rest of us do? Research the curse, Harry said. The ritual to complete the bond. Daphne's father said the Greengrass archives have fragments. We need to find the rest. The Hogwarts restricted section may have relevant texts, Daphne said. Blood maledictions are covered in advanced dark arts theory. And the bond itself, soul bonds are rare enough that there may be only a handful of references in the entire library. I'll talk to McGonagall about access, Harry said. Daphne hesitated, then nodded. It was the first time she'd accepted a plan without arguing, and Harry could see it cost her. He didn't acknowledge it. He was learning. Their first class of the day was Defense Against the Dark Arts, taught this year by a quiet, scarred wizard named Professor Alderton who'd spent the war running a safe house in Cornwall. He was good, practical, no nonsense, the kind of teacher who'd actually fought and didn't romanticize it. Harry liked him. The classroom was arranged for practical work, desks pushed to the walls, the center clear. Alderton stood in the middle and waited for silence. Paired shield work today. One attacks, one defends. I want to see how you adapt to an opponent you haven't practiced with. And since the headmistress is very keen on inter-house cooperation, a dry smile. You'll be working with someone from a different house. Pair up. The room shuffled. Harry felt a dozen eyes on him. Everyone either wanted to partner with the boy who lived or desperately didn't. He turned to Daphne, who was already standing beside him. Proximity, she said, by way of explanation. Works for me. She looked surprised, as if she'd expected him to argue. I'll shield first. They took their position in the center. Around them, other pairs were settling in, Ron with Zabini, looking about as thrilled as a man being paired with a root canal, Hermione with a Ravenclaw 7th year, Neville with Tracy. Begin, Alderton said. Harry opened with a standard stinging hex, moderate power, testing. Daphne's shield snapped up so fast he barely saw her wand move, a shimmering blue barrier that absorbed the hex without a ripple. That all you've got, Potter? He grinned despite himself. Sent a reductor curse, then a quick impediment jinx from the left. Daphne blocked the reductor, sidestepped the jinx entirely, and fired back a tripping hex that he had to jump over. We're supposed to take turns, he said. Consider it feedback. He upped the intensity. A blasting curse, followed by 2 rapid stunners from different angles. Daphne's shield held on the blast but cracked on the second stunner, and she had to roll sideways, actual combat roll, smooth and practiced, to avoid the third. Not bad, she said, slightly breathless. You've trained. My father hired tutors. He wanted me to be able to protect myself, given that, she gestured vaguely at herself. Given that she was cursed to die. Your turn to shield. They switched. Daphne's casting style was nothing like his. Harry was instinctive, reactive, powered by adrenaline and a deep-seated refusal to stay down. Daphne was precise. Every spell had a purpose. Every angle was calculated. She didn't throw power at him, she picked apart his defense like a chess player removing pieces. Her first volley was a feint, a knockback jinx aimed at his chest that he blocked easily, followed by a leglocker curse aimed at his ankles that he barely caught in time. Then a silencing charm, which confused him because it wasn't an attack spell, and in the half-second he spent wondering about it, she hit him with a disarming charm that ripped his wand clean out of his hand. His wand flew across the room. The class went quiet. You hesitate when you don't understand an opponent's strategy, Daphne said, lowering her wand. You expect attacks to be direct. They're not always. Harry stared at her. Then he laughed, a real laugh, the first one in weeks, surprised out of him by the sheer audacity of being disarmed by someone half his weight who fought like a surgeon. Daphne blinked. Something shifted in her expression, not a smile, but a loosening, the mask slipping just enough to let curiosity through. You're not angry. Angry? That was brilliant. He summoned his wand. Again. Again. They went again. And again. And each time, something changed. Not just in their spells, in the space between them. The bond responded to their magic working in proximity, and it was like turning up the volume on a radio that had been set to static. Harry began to feel Daphne's casting before she moved, not the spell itself, but the intention, the gathering of magic before it released. She began to feel his too, adjusting her aim as he dodged before he'd committed to a direction. By the 4th round, they'd stopped taking turns. They were dueling openly, spells flying in both directions, shields overlapping, and the rest of the class had stopped working to watch. Harry sent a reductor that should have overwhelmed her shield. Instead of blocking it, Daphne deflected it into his own stunner, which was coming from the opposite direction, and the 2 spells collided in midair and produced a detonation of golden light that blew both of them backward. Harry hit the floor, rolled, came up on one knee. Daphne was doing the same on the other side of the room. Their eyes met across the smoking gap between them, and they were both breathing hard, and the bond between them was singing, a resonance like a tuning fork struck against glass, clear and bright and powerful. Enough. Alderton's voice cut through the ringing in Harry's ears. The professor was standing at the edge of the blast zone, his expression a complicated mixture of alarm and fascination. That's enough. Both of you. The rest of the class was staring. Ron's mouth was hanging open. Hermione's eyes were very wide and very analytical. That, Alderton said slowly, was the most powerful magical feedback loop I've ever seen in a classroom. Your spells are amplifying each other. The bond is acting as a conduit, what one of you casts, the other reinforces unconsciously. He looked between them. I've read about this in theory. I've never seen it happen. Daphne was standing, smoothing her robes, trying to reassemble her composure. But Harry could feel her through the bond, and what she was feeling wasn't embarrassment. It was exhilaration. Wild, startled, almost giddy exhilaration that she was clamping down on with everything she had. She'd enjoyed that. She'd loved that. He caught her eye. She looked away quickly, but not before he saw the flush on her cheeks that had nothing to do with exertion. I want you both working together for the rest of the term, Alderton said. Under controlled conditions. This kind of resonance is too powerful to leave untrained, and too dangerous to let loose without understanding. He paused. Also, you owe me a new practice dummy. You vaporized the one in the corner. Harry looked. Where a wooden training dummy had stood, there was a small, smoking crater in the stone floor. Oops, he said. Daphne pressed her lips together. It might have been disapproval. It might have been the beginning of a laugh she wasn't ready to let out. After class, Hermione cornered him in the corridor while Daphne and Tracy walked ahead. Harry, the magical resonance in there, that's not normal soul bond behavior. I've been reading. Soul bonds are supposed to stabilize, not amplify. What happened in that classroom suggests your cores aren't just compatible, they're complementary. Your magic fills the gaps in hers, and hers fills the gaps in yours. What does that mean practically? It means that together, you're significantly more powerful than either of you alone. And it means that if the bond is completed, if you do the ritual, the combined power could be. She trailed off, calculating. Could be what? Considerable. Historically considerable. She looked at him with an expression he knew well, the one that meant she'd realized something important and was deciding how to say it. It also means that anyone who controls the bond controls access to that power. Do you understand? If Selwyn gains guardianship over Daphne, he gains leverage over the bond. Over both of you. Your magic is linked now, Harry. Whatever legal authority applies to her applies, in some sense, to the bond itself. To you. The corridor was empty. Ahead, Daphne had stopped walking and was waiting for him, not impatiently, not with any expression at all, but simply standing at the edge of the 40-foot range as if she'd measured it exactly. Which she probably had. We need to find that ritual, Harry said. We need to find it fast, Hermione agreed. The restricted section of the Hogwarts library smelled like dust and old magic. McGonagall had given Harry and Daphne unrestricted access with a signed note that made Madame Pance's eyebrows climb into her hairline, but the librarian said nothing and retreated to her desk to judge them from a distance. They worked in silence for the first hour. Harry wasn't a natural researcher, he lacked Hermione's systematic approach and Daphne's apparently encyclopedic knowledge of magical taxonomy, but he was stubborn, and stubbornness counted for a lot when you were digging through 600-year-old texts looking for a needle in a haystack. Daphne, he discovered, was terrifyingly efficient. She'd brought a system, color-coded bookmarks, a cross-reference chart she'd started building that morning, and a quill that took notes automatically as she read. She moved through texts like a scalpel through tissue, extracting what was useful and discarding the rest. You've done this before, Harry said, watching her flip through a crumbling volume on blood curses. Research? Yes. I'm a student. I mean research this. Your curse. Her hand paused on the page. Since I was 14. Every summer, every holiday, every spare hour. I know the theory of blood maledictions better than most professional curse breakers. And you never found anything? I found plenty. None of it helps. She turned another page. The curse is well designed. Whoever Aldrich Selwyn was, he was brilliant. Evil, but brilliant. The malediction is self-reinforcing, it draws power from the victim's own magic to sustain itself. The stronger the witch, the faster it kills her. My mother was exceptionally powerful. The implication hung in the air. So are you, Harry said. She didn't answer, but the bond flickered with something warm and complicated. They read on. Harry found a passage in a 1650s treatise on magical bonds that described the soul bond phenomenon in clinical terms, the spontaneous linking of compatible magical cores under conditions of existential threat. The author, a witch named Elspeth Dagworth, noted that completed soul bonds produced a resonance of such magnitude that no external force could sever or subvert the joined cores, rendering both participants effectively immune to magical coercion, compulsion, or extraction. Immune to extraction, Harry read aloud. That means no one could drain your magic once the bond is complete. The curse wouldn't be able to feed. Daphne looked up. For the first time since they'd started, there was something in her eyes that wasn't guarded. Read me the exact passage. He did. She listened with her head slightly tilted, one finger tapping her lower lip, a habit, he realized, that appeared when she was thinking hard. When he finished, she pulled the book toward her and reread it herself, twice. This aligns with what my father found, she said slowly. The ritual doesn't destroy the curse directly. It makes the curse irrelevant. If our cores are fully merged, the malediction has nothing to grip. It can't feed on magic that's anchored to two people simultaneously, the bond creates a closed circuit. So the curse just stops. In theory. It would still be there, encoded in my blood. But it would be dormant. Starved. She looked at him. Like a fire without oxygen. That's good, right? That's progress. It's a theory supported by one source from the 17th century. But her voice had changed, lighter, less armored. The bond hummed between them, and this time the emotion bleeding through was hope, tentative and fragile. We'll find more sources, Harry said. Hermione's already looking. Granger is, surprisingly competent. Don't tell her, surprisingly. She'll hex you. The corner of Daphne's mouth twitched. Noted. They worked until dinner, side by side at a table in the restricted section, and somewhere in those hours, the silence between them shifted from uncomfortable to companionable. Not warm. Not yet. But the sharp edges were wearing down, friction smoothing stone, and by the time they packed up their notes, Harry realized he'd spent an entire afternoon with Daphne Greengrass without either of them drawing blood. Progress. Dinner was another Hufflepuff table affair. Neville joined them this time, sliding in beside Ron with a cheerful, budge over, and a nod to Daphne that was friendly and uncomplicated in a way that made her blink. Heard about defense, Neville said. You two blew up a training dummy. Vaporized, Ron corrected. There's a difference. Blowing up leaves pieces. They vaporized it. Nothing left but a scorch mark. Wicked. It was an accident, Daphne said stiffly. Best things usually are. Neville grinned. Tracy told me about the bonding research. I might be able to help, Gran has connections at the Department of Mysteries. Some of the oldest magical theory texts are archived there, not at Hogwarts. Daphne studied him. Harry could feel her reassessing, the bond gave him flickers of her thought process, not words but impressions. She'd expected Neville to be what he'd been in first year, awkward, timid, forgettable. The confident, easy young man in front of her didn't match her template, and she was adjusting. That would be useful, she said. Thank you, Longbottom. Neville. Neville. Harry caught Ron's eye across the table. Ron raised an eyebrow. Harry shrugged. This was happening. Whatever it was happening, and all he could do was try not to mess it up. After dinner, Daphne excused herself to write to her father. Harry walked back to the suite with Tracy, who fell into step beside him with the air of someone who had something to say. She smiled today, Tracy said. In defense. After you laughed at her disarming you. I wasn't laughing at her. I know. That's why she smiled. You laughed because you were impressed, not because she did something funny. Nobody's ever responded to her that way. People either fear her or want something from her. You did neither. Harry didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. She'll deny it, Tracy continued. If you bring it up, she'll say she didn't smile, and then she'll add 3 feet of ice to her walls. So don't bring it up. Just, keep doing what you're doing. I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah. That's why it's working. They reached the suite. Tracy went to her room. Harry went to his and sat on the bed and pressed his hand to his chest and felt the double heartbeat, Daphne's and his own, almost, not quite, but almost, in sync. He was still sitting like that when the screaming started. It came from the common room, not Daphne's room, the common room, and it wasn't a scream of fear. It was a scream of pain, raw and ragged and wrong, and Harry was through his door before the sound had finished. Daphne was on the floor. Not collapsed this time, on her hands and knees, fighting to stay up, and the dark lines he'd seen under her skin in the hospital wing were blazing. Black veins traced across her arms, her neck, her face, pulsing with a sickly light that had nothing to do with her natural magic. The gold was gone. This was the curse, and it was active. Tracy burst from her room. Daphne. Daphne, what happened? Something triggered it. Daphne's voice was shredded. She was shaking violently, her arms barely holding her up, and the dark veins were spreading, climbing, reaching for her chest. This isn't a normal episode, something's pushing it. Harry dropped to his knees beside her. The bond was screaming, not metaphorically, he could actually hear it, a high-pitched keen that was resonating in his teeth, and his magic was surging, trying to reach hers, but the curse was between them like a wall of black glass. What do I do? He said. Daphne, tell me what to do. I don't, it's never done this. The letter, her eyes went wide. The letter. From dinner. I opened it and, she convulsed. The dark veins reached her heart, and she screamed again, and this time the sound cut off halfway, replaced by a choking gasp that was worse than the scream. Tracy grabbed the letter from the desk where Daphne had been sitting. She held it up, and even from across the room, Harry could feel it, a cold, oily presence, like touching something dead. The parchment was ordinary. The handwriting was elegant. But the wax seal, broken and innocuous looking, was radiating dark magic like heat from a coal. It's cursed, Tracy said, her face white. The seal was cursed. She broke it and, Harry didn't think. He reached for Daphne. The moment his hand touched her arm, the bond detonated. Gold light erupted from the point of contact, blazing through the dark veins like sunlight through cracks, and Daphne gasped, not in pain, in relief, as his magic slammed through the bond and into her, raw and furious and protective. The curse fought back. Harry could feel it, a living malice, ancient and patient, trying to hold its ground, but his magic was a flood and the curse was a dam, and something in him, something deeper than thought, deeper than intention, said no. Not her. Not this. Not tonight. The gold light expanded. The dark veins retreated, not gone, not destroyed, but pushed back, forced to contract, beaten into remission by the sheer force of magic pouring through the bond. Daphne's body arched, then went limp, and the light faded, and the room was quiet except for their breathing. Harry was holding her. He didn't remember pulling her up, but she was in his arms, her back against his chest, her head tipped against his shoulder. Her eyes were closed. The dark veins had receded to faint shadows under her skin. The bond between them was wide open, and he could feel everything, her exhaustion, her pain, her terror, and underneath it all, a gratitude so fierce it burned. "Daphne?" His voice was rough. "I'm here." Barely a whisper. "I'm here." Tracy was already casting Patronus messengers, one to Pomfrey, one to McGonagall. She picked up the cursed letter with a conjured cloth, handling it like a live grenade. "I can see the sender," Tracy said, her voice shaking with fury. "The letterhead. It's from the Committee for Post-War Magical Heritage Preservation." Harry's arms tightened around Daphne. "Selwyn," he said. The letter was neutralized by Pomfrey, analyzed by McGonagall, and locked in a warded box before the hour was out. The curse embedded in the seal was sophisticated, a catalytic trigger designed to accelerate a pre-existing blood malediction. On its own, it was nearly undetectable. In Daphne's hands, it was a weapon designed to look like a natural progression of her disease. If Mr. Potter hadn't been in proximity when it activated, Pomfrey said, her voice tight with controlled anger, the acceleration could have been permanent. "We might be looking at weeks instead of months." McGonagall stood by the fireplace, her expression carved from granite. "The letter bears the official seal of the Heritage Committee. Sending a cursed object through official ministry channels is an act of criminal intent. Proving it is another matter," Daphne said. She was sitting up in bed, Harry's bed, because it was the closest and nobody had wanted to move her far from him. Harry sat in a chair beside her, close enough that the bond hummed steadily, holding the curse at bay. The seal curse would have dissipated after activation. If I'd been alone, there would have been no evidence. Just another episode. Just the curse, progressing naturally. "But you weren't alone," Harry said. "No." She looked at him, and for once, the mask was down. Not because she'd chosen to lower it, but because she was too exhausted to hold it up. Her face was open and tired and young, and the fear in her eyes was not for herself. "He tried to kill me, Potter. Through official ministry post. He's not just circling anymore. He's moving. Then we move faster." Harry leaned forward. "Hermione's already digging into the legal framework. Neville's contacting the Department of Mysteries. We've got the start of a ritual theory from the restricted section. And now we have evidence that Selwyn is actively trying to harm you, not just politically, physically. Evidence that no one will believe. The seal is destroyed. The letter itself is innocuous, just a polite inquiry about my health and a reminder of the committee's upcoming review. Any competent solicitor would argue the curse was added by a third party in transit. Then we don't fight him in court. Not yet." Harry's jaw was set. "We fight him by staying alive and completing the bond before he can stop us. That's what he's afraid of, isn't it? The completed bond. Once it's done, the curse can't kill you, and he loses whatever power he's been draining from your family." Daphne stared at him. The bond was open wide between them, and through it, he could feel her mind working, not thoughts, but the shape of them, quick and sharp and relentless. "You're proposing we treat the bond ritual as a tactical objective," she said. "I'm proposing we treat it like what it is. A way to save your life and cut Selwyn off at the knees simultaneously. The ritual requires a permanent merging of our magical cores. You understand what you're committing to. I fought Voldemort in a forest because a dead man told me it was the right thing to do. I think I can handle sharing my magic with someone who's actually alive." The room was quiet. Tracy was watching from the doorway with an expression Harry couldn't read. Pomfrey was pretending to organize her medical kit. McGonagall was very still. Daphne held his gaze for a long time. Then, slowly, something changed in her face. Not a smile. Something deeper. An acceptance. A decision. "All right, Potter," she said. "All right. We do this together." She held out her hand. He took it. The bond between them steadied, hummed, and settled into something that felt, for the first time, like a foundation. Not finished. Not complete. But solid enough to build on. McGonagall turned to leave, pausing at the door. I will be writing to the minister personally about the Heritage Committee's correspondence. Whatever Selwyn is planning, he will find that Hogwarts protects its students. Her eyes were fierce behind her spectacles. All of them. She swept out. Pomfrey followed, with instructions to sleep and a threat to return at dawn with potions that neither of them would enjoy. Tracy lingered. She looked at Harry, then at Daphne, then at their hands, still clasped, neither of them having let go. I'll be in my room, she said. Shout if you need anything. She closed her door, and then it was just the two of them in the lamplight, holding hands across the gap between bed and chair, the bond humming softly, the castle quiet around them. You should sleep, Harry said. So should you. I will. I'll be right here. Daphne's fingers tightened on his. Potter. Yeah. Harry. She said his name carefully, like she was testing the weight of it. Thank you. For, tonight. For the magic. I know you didn't choose this. Neither did you. No. But I'm starting to think. She trailed off, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. Think what? That my magic might have better judgment than I do. Her eyes closed. Her hand stayed in his. Don't let go. I won't. She slept. Harry sat in the chair beside her, their hands clasped, and felt her heartbeat slow and steady through the bond. The warmth behind his ribs pulsed in time with it, no longer a foreign sensation, but something familiar. Something that felt, against all reason, like it had always been there, waiting for him to notice. Outside, the castle slept. But somewhere in London, in a ministry office, a man in expensive robes received a message that said, simply, she survived. The bond intervened. Marcus Selwyn read the message. He crumpled it. He dropped it into the fireplace and watched it burn, his face lit by flames that cast long shadows across the wall. Then he opened the drawer with the ornate box and listened to the heartbeat inside, still going, still fighting, refusing to stop. Persistent, he murmured. Just like your mother. He closed the drawer and reached for a fresh sheet of parchment. If the subtle approach wasn't working, it was time to be less subtle. Chapter 3, What Lies Beneath. 3 days after someone tried to kill her through the post, Daphne Greengrass walked into the shared common room at 6 a.m, fully dressed, hair braided, a leather satchel over one shoulder, and said, "Get up, Potter. We're leaving Hogwarts." Harry was already awake. He'd been awake since 4, sitting in the armchair by the dead fireplace, staring at the ceiling and feeling the bond pulse between them, steady now, a rhythm he was learning to read the way sailors read tides. He'd felt her wake up 20 minutes ago. Felt her go still the way she did when she was making a decision. Felt the decision settle. "Where?" he said. "Greengrass Manor. My father's archives. There are texts there that aren't in any library, family records going back to the original curse. If the ritual framework exists in complete form anywhere, it's in our vaults. McGonagall won't like us leaving. McGonagall gave me a standing flu authorization 2 days ago. Medical necessity, the proximity requirement means I can't travel without you, and she'd rather I have the option than be trapped here if another attack comes." Daphne set her satchel on the table. "I sent an owl to my father last night. He's expecting us." Harry looked at her. She was composed, armored, the mask firmly in place, but the bond told a different story. Underneath the control, she was vibrating with urgency. The cursed letter had shaken her more than she'd admitted. Not the pain, she was used to pain. The precision. Someone knew her curse well enough to accelerate it remotely, and that meant someone had been studying her family's affliction for a very long time. "Give me 10 minutes, he said. They left through the flue in McGonagall's office, after a brief conversation in which the headmistress looked at them over her spectacles and said, "Be careful. Be back by nightfall. And if anything feels wrong, you leave immediately." "Define wrong," Harry said. "You'll know it when you feel it, Mr. Potter." "You always do." The flue deposited them in a drawing room that smelled like old wood and fresh flowers. Greengrass Manor was nothing like the dark, oppressive pureblood estates Harry had encountered. No skulls, no cursed artifacts, no sense of accumulated malice. It was a country house, sprawling and weathered, with tall windows that let in grey autumn light and walls hung with landscapes rather than portraits. Daphne stepped out of the fireplace and something in her changed. Not visibly, her posture was the same, her expression the same, but through the bond, Harry felt a loosening. This was her ground. Her territory. The place where the mask was heaviest but also, paradoxically, where it was most needed. "Father will be in the study," she said, already moving. "This way." Harry followed her through corridors that were wide and clean and slightly too quiet. The house felt empty in a way that went beyond the absence of people, it felt waiting. Like it was holding its breath. They passed a door that was closed. Daphne's step faltered for just a fraction of a second, so brief that if Harry hadn't been watching closely, he'd have missed it. The bond flared with something sharp, grief, old and deep and kept in a locked room of its own. "My mother's sitting room," Daphne said, without being asked. She didn't slow down. "We don't go in there." Harry said nothing. He understood about rooms you didn't go into. Cyrus Greengrass was waiting in a study lined with books and smelling of tea and parchment. He looked worse than he had a week ago. The tremor in his hands had spread to his arms, and the translucence of his skin had deepened, veins visible at his temples like ink beneath rice paper. But his eyes were sharp, and he stood when they entered, and his handshake was firm even if his grip shook. "You look better," he said to Daphne, studying her face with the intensity of a man who'd spent 18 years cataloguing every shade of his daughter's health. "The bond is helping. It's managing the symptoms. It's not a solution. Which is why you're here." Cyrus turned to Harry. "The family archives are in the lower vaults. They're blood-warded, only a Greengrass can open them. But given the bond, you should be able to pass the wards with Daphne." "Should?" Harry said. "The wards are old. They recognize magical signatures, not names. Your magic is tangled with hers now. In theory, the wards will read you as family." A pause. "In theory. And if they don't? Then you'll have a very unpleasant experience that I'd rather not describe in detail." Cyrus almost smiled. "Stay close to her. I've been hearing that a lot lately." The vaults were beneath the manor, accessed through a door in the cellar that looked like every other door until Daphne pressed her palm against it and murmured something in a language Harry didn't recognize. The wood shimmered, turned translucent, and revealed a staircase descending into cool, blue-lit darkness. "After you," Harry said. "No. Together." Daphne held out her hand. "The wards need to read us simultaneously." He took her hand. Her fingers were cool and steady, steadier than they'd been a week ago. The bond hummed at the contact, gold warmth flowing between them, and when they stepped through the doorway together, Harry felt the wards wash over him like walking through a waterfall. A pressure, a probing, a moment of resistance, and then acceptance, like a lock clicking open. The staircase led down into a chamber that was larger than the drawing room above. Shelves lined every wall, floor to ceiling, packed with books, scrolls, bound manuscripts, and objects Harry couldn't identify. The blue light came from crystals set in the ceiling, steady and cool, casting no shadows. 600 years of Greengrass records, Daphne said. She released his hand and moved to a shelf on the far wall, running her fingers along the spines with familiar ease. "My father organized most of it. I've been through roughly a third. A third of 600 years. When? Summers. Holidays. The year I told everyone I was visiting relatives in France, I was actually down here for 4 weeks. She pulled a thick, leather-bound volume from the shelf and set it on the reading table in the center of the room. This is the oldest complete account of the curse. Written by Isolde Greengrass in 1438, 26 years after Aldrich Selwyn cast the malediction. Harry sat down across from her. The book was handwritten, the ink faded but legible, the language Old English that required effort to parse. Daphne opened it to a marked page and turned it toward him. Isolde was the second victim. Aldrich's original target was her mother, Elara, who died in 1420. Isolde survived. She's the only recorded case of the curse being successfully managed before the victim's death, though she didn't complete a soul bond. She found a way to slow the progression through a series of magical anchoring rituals, but they were temporary. She died at 31. How old was the first victim? Elara? 29. Daphne turned another page. My mother was 33. She lasted longer than most because my father helped her develop improved anchoring techniques. But the curse adapts. It learns. Each generation, it's harder to slow. Harry read the passage she'd indicated. Isolde's handwriting was cramped and urgent, the words of someone writing against a deadline. The malediction is not merely a curse upon the blood, it is a siphon. Each death feeds the original casting, strengthening the enchantment for the next generation. I have traced the flow of stolen magic and believe it returns to the Selwyn line, sustaining enchantments upon their estate and augmenting the power of their heirs. We are not simply cursed. We are being harvested. Harvested, Harry said. Every Greengrass woman who dies of this curse makes the Selwyns more powerful. It's not revenge. It's agriculture. Daphne's voice was flat, but the bond was burning with cold fury. 6 centuries of my family's women dying to feed another family's magic. Harry stared at the page. The word harvested sat in his chest like a shard of ice. He thought of Voldemort's Horcruxes, another form of magical parasitism, another way of extending power through stolen life. Different methods. Same fundamental evil. Selwyn knows this, he said. It wasn't a question. Marcus Selwyn is the current head of the Selwyn family. Their estate is one of the most magically fortified properties in Britain, centuries of accumulated stolen power. If I die, that power increases. If the bond is completed and the curse goes dormant, the siphon stops. She closed the book. He's not just protecting an inheritance. He's protecting a food source. They spent the next 3 hours in the vault. Daphne moved through the archives with the precision of someone who'd been doing this for years, pulling relevant texts, cross-referencing dates and names, building a picture that was equal parts scholarship and detective work. Harry helped where he could, reading passages she flagged, noting connections, asking questions that occasionally made her pause and look at him with something approaching respect. You're not stupid, she said at one point, sounding almost annoyed about it. Thanks. I think. Most people assume that because you didn't excel academically, you're not intelligent. That's wrong. You think laterally. You see patterns that aren't obvious. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. She turned back to her book, but the tips of her ears were pink. At noon, Cyrus brought them tea and sandwiches and sat with them for a while, adding context that the written records lacked. He spoke about Daphne's mother, Eloan, with a careful, measured grief that was more devastating than any display of emotion could have been. He described her the way you describe a landscape you love that was destroyed by fire, every detail sharp, every memory precious, the loss so total it had become its own geography. Daphne listened without expression. But through the bond, Harry felt the earthquake she was containing. Layers of grief and anger and longing, compressed into a space so small it was almost invisible, held in place by sheer force of will. She had learned this control from necessity, fall apart and the curse surged, emotions feeding the malediction like oxygen feeding flame. She had taught herself to feel nothing, or at least to appear to feel nothing, and the cost of that discipline was written in the rigid line of her shoulders and the careful blankness of her eyes. Cyrus left. The afternoon deepened. And then, at 3 o'clock, Daphne found it. Harry. First name. She'd used it twice before, once in exhaustion, once in pain. This was neither. This was discovery. He moved to her side of the table. She had a scroll open, very old, the parchment so fragile it was nearly transparent. The writing was in Latin, accompanied by diagrams that looked like astronomical charts overlaid with runic patterns. "This is Isolde's final research," Daphne said. Her voice had that particular quality, controlled excitement, the scholar in her rising to the surface. She spent the last years of her life trying to design the complete soul bond ritual. She couldn't use it, she never found her match, but she left the theoretical framework. "Can you read it?" "My Latin is adequate. The runic notation will take longer." She was already translating, her quill moving in quick, precise strokes. The ritual requires 3 components. First, a shared magical act, both parties must cast simultaneously, merging their magic willingly. Second, an anchor, a physical object that can hold the merged magic while the cores restructure. Third. She trailed off, reading ahead, her brow furrowing. Third. A sacrifice of magical sovereignty. Not power, sovereignty. The distinction matters. The ritual doesn't take your magic. It makes your magic ours. Permanently. You would never again be fully magically independent. Neither would I. Every spell you cast would carry an echo of my core, and every spell I cast would carry an echo of yours. Harry considered this. How is that different from what's already happening? In defense, our spells were already amplifying each other. That's passive resonance, a side effect of the bond. The ritual would make it structural. Permanent. Like. She searched for an analogy. Like the difference between 2 rivers running parallel and 2 rivers merging into one. The water is still water. But you can never separate it again. And you think that's worse than dying? She flinched. I think it's a decision no one should make for someone else. And I think asking you to give up your magical independence, permanently, irrevocably, so that I can survive is not something I can do lightly. You're not asking. I'm offering. You barely know me. I know you've been carrying this since you were 12. I know you pushed everyone away so they wouldn't hurt when you died. I know you're brilliant and stubborn and scared, and I know your magic chose mine, and I know that for the first time in months, I feel like I'm doing something that matters. He held her gaze. I don't need to know your favorite color to know I want to help you live. The vault was very quiet. The blue crystals hummed overhead. Daphne's eyes were bright, not with tears, she was too controlled for that, but with something dangerously close. Blue, she said. What? My favorite color. It's blue. She looked down at the scroll. We should keep translating. They worked in silence for another hour, the bond between them warm and steady. The scroll yielded its secret slowly. The ritual was complex, layered with safeguards and conditions that Isolde had designed to prevent exploitation. The anchor object needed to be forged specifically for the bonded pair, imbued with elements of both their magical signatures. The shared casting had to occur at a location of confluence, a place where multiple ley lines intersected, amplifying ambient magic to the level required for core restructuring. There are only a handful of confluence points in Britain, Daphne said, noting them on a map she'd conjured. Stonehenge. The Tor at Glastonbury. And Hogwarts, Harry said. She nodded slowly. Hogwarts is built on one of the most powerful magical confluence points in the world. It's why the founders chose the location. So we can do the ritual at school. In theory. But there's a problem. She pointed to a passage near the end of the scroll. The ritual must be performed during a period of aligned celestial resonance. Isolde doesn't specify what that means in modern astronomical terms. I'll need to cross-reference with current star charts. Hermione can do that. Yes. Daphne paused, then added, almost reluctantly, she really is quite good at this sort of thing. I'll tell her you said so. You will not. He grinned. She glared. But the glare had warmth in it now, a human warmth that hadn't been there a week ago, and the bond hummed with something that felt suspiciously like affection. It was 4 o'clock when Cyrus appeared in the vault doorway, and his face told Harry everything before he spoke. You need to leave, Cyrus said. Now. There are people on the grounds. Harry was on his feet instantly. The warmth of the afternoon evaporated. What people? 3 wizards. They came through the outer wards 10 minutes ago, the wards I keyed to allow ministry officials, because Selwyn's committee insisted on inspection access as a condition of the guardianship review. Cyrus's voice was tight with suppressed anger. They're not inspectors. They're moving toward the house in a sweep pattern. A search formation. Daphne was already rolling the scroll and sliding it into her satchel, her movements quick and precise, scholar replaced by soldier in the space of a breath. They're looking for the archives. That would be my guess. Selwyn knows about the vaults. He's been petitioning for access for months. I've refused, citing blood ward restrictions. But if his people are here, they'll try to take the records by force. Daphne's expression was ice and steel. Father, you need to seal the vault. Full lockdown. Nothing gets in or out. I will. But you need to be out first. Both of you. Cyrus looked at Harry. Can you get her back to Hogwarts safely? The flu will be the first thing they disable. It's standard procedure for a forced entry, cut communication, isolate the target. Cyrus was already moving, his hands tracing rune patterns on the vault wall. The blue crystals pulsed. I have a secondary exit. A port key I prepared for emergencies. It'll take you to Hogsmeade. From there, you can walk to the castle. He pulled a pocket watch from his robes, old, battered, with a cracked face, and handed it to Harry. Activation word is, Eloan. It'll work once. Daphne took the watch from Harry's hand. Her fingers were steady, but the bond was screaming with adrenaline and fear and something fierce and protective that was aimed not at herself but at her father. Come with us, she said. I can't. The vault needs a Greengrass to seal it, and you need to be out of range before I do. If those records fall into Selwyn's hands, he'll have everything he needs to understand the bond and find a way to exploit it. Cyrus cupped her face in his trembling hands. Go. Finish the research. Complete the ritual. End this. Father, Daphne. His voice cracked for the first time. Please. Let me protect you. Just this once, let me. She looked at him, really looked, the mask fully gone, and Harry saw the little girl she'd been. 7 years old, holding her mother's hand as the curse took her. 12, sitting in a healer's office, being told she'd die the same way. 14, alone in this vault, searching for answers that weren't there. 17, standing in a castle full of war, keeping her secret, keeping her walls, keeping herself alive through sheer, bloody-minded refusal to fall apart. I love you, she said. I know. Now go. Harry took her arm. She clutched the pocket watch. Above them, through layers of stone and earth, they heard the front door of the manor explode inward. Eloan, Daphne said, and the hook behind Harry's navel pulled them sideways through space. They landed hard in a field outside Hogsmeade. Harry kept his feet, Daphne stumbled, and he caught her, one arm around her waist, and for a moment they stood like that in the tall grass, breathing hard, the October sky vast and grey above them. He'll be all right, Harry said, because it was what she needed to hear, and because he believed it. Cyrus Greengrass was dying slowly, but he was not weak, and the vault wards were blood-forged and ancient, and 3 ministry thugs would find them harder to crack than they expected. Daphne straightened. Pulled away from his arm. Reassembled. "We need to move," she said. They walked toward Hogwarts. The road from Hogsmeade was familiar to Harry. He'd walked it dozens of times, in snow and sun and the strange blue twilight of Scottish autumn evenings. But he'd never walked it with his magic on high alert and his hand on his wand and a girl beside him whose heartbeat he could feel through a bond that was thrumming like a plucked wire. They were halfway to the castle when the first spell hit. It came from the tree line on the right, a stunner, well aimed, fast, and Harry's shield was up before he'd consciously registered the threat. The red bolt splashed against his protego and scattered. "Down," he shouted, but Daphne was already moving, dropping into a crouch, wand out, firing a blasting curse into the trees with a precision that shattered a trunk and flushed 2 figures into the open. They were masked. Dark robes, featureless silver masks, not Death Eater design, Harry noted with the clinical part of his brain that catalogued threats, but something newer, sleeker. Professional. The third one came from the left. Harry spun, caught a body bind with a deflection charm, and sent a reductor back that the attacker barely dodged. The man was good, trained, disciplined, nothing like the wild brutality of Death Eaters. These were operatives. Selwyn's people. 2 on the right, 1 on the left, Daphne said, her voice perfectly calm, as if they were discussing chess positions. "The 2 on the right are staying together. Coordinated. I'll take the pair. You handle the single. Don't be stupid. They'll flank you. Then don't let them." He caught her eye. She caught his. And the bond between them did something extraordinary. It opened, wider than it ever had, and for one crystalline moment, Harry could feel Daphne's magic as clearly as his own. Her core, bright and sharp and precise, layered over his, which was deep and raw and relentless. 2 instruments playing the same note in different octaves. They moved without speaking. Harry charged the pair on the right. Not recklessly, he'd learned tactics the hard way, years of fighting things that wanted to kill him, but aggressively, closing distance, giving them no room to set up crossfire. His first spell was a concussive hex that hit the ground between them and knocked both backward. His second was a disarming charm at the one on the left, who blocked it but lost his footing on the muddy ground. His third was a stunner that he poured magic into, more than usual, more than he'd normally risk on a single spell, and felt the bond amplify it, Daphne's magic resonating with his from 20 feet away, and the red bolt that left his wand was blinding. It hit the first operative center mass and blew him off his feet. He didn't get up. The second recovered faster than Harry expected. A curse, not a stunner, something nastier, a dark purple bolt that hummed with intent, slashed past Harry's ear close enough to singe his hair. He rolled, came up casting, and they dueled in the fading light, spell for spell, shield for shield. The operative was good. But Harry Potter had dueled Voldemort in the courtyard of Hogwarts and walked away, and the memory of that was in his magic, in his bones, in the way his wand moved like an extension of his will. He fainted high, struck low, and a leglocker curse caught the operative at the ankle. The man stumbled. Harry's stunner put him down. He turned. Daphne was standing over the third operative, who was on the ground, wandless, trussed in conjured ropes. She hadn't just beaten him, she dismantled him. The man's mask was cracked, his wand snapped in 2 pieces on the ground beside him, and Daphne was pointing her wand at his throat with an expression that was nothing like the Ice Queen. It was something older. Something that came from 600 years of her family's women dying at the hands of people like this. "Who sent you?" she said. The operative said nothing. "I asked you a question." She pressed her wand into the soft flesh beneath his jaw. "You attacked 2 students on a public road. That's assault. With those masks, it's conspiracy. I could make a very strong case for self-defense if my next spell is less gentle than the last one." "Daphne," Harry said. She didn't look at him. "He tried to kill us. And he's down. He's done." Harry moved closer. Not to stop her, he trusted her, but to be there. We need information, not revenge. And the Aurors will get more out of him than we will. The operative's eyes moved between them behind the cracked mask. Harry could see enough of the man's face to tell he was young, mid-20s, maybe. Not a fanatic. A hireling. Someone doing a job. Daphne lowered her wand. 1 inch at a time, like sheathing a blade. Smart man, she said to the operative. To Harry, without turning, send for the Aurors. Harry cast a Patronus, the stag erupted from his wand, silver and bright, and Daphne's eyes widened slightly, the first crack in her composure since the fight started, and sent it galloping toward the castle with a message for McGonagall. They waited in the darkening field, 3 unconscious operatives at their feet, and the adrenaline slowly drained out of Harry's body and left him feeling hollow and very, very awake. You're good, he said to Daphne. So are you. She paused. Your Patronus is a stag. Yeah. Has been since 3rd year. It's beautiful. She said it quietly, like she hadn't meant to say it out loud, and then she turned away and looked at the road toward the castle, and the bond between them was full of something warm and complicated that neither of them named. The Aurors came. McGonagall came. The operatives were taken into custody, and their masks were removed, and they were exactly what Harry had expected, hired wands, no direct connection to Selwyn that could be proven, no paper trail, no evidence. Professional. He'll deny everything, Daphne said, sitting in McGonagall's office an hour later, a cup of tea cooling in her hands. The operatives were probably obliviated before the mission. Standard precaution for deniable operations. You know a lot about deniable operations, Ron said. He'd arrived with Hermione the moment word reached the castle, and was now sitting on the arm of a chair looking both worried and deeply impressed. I know a lot about the kind of people who use them. Daphne took a sip of tea. Selwyn operates like a general, not a thug. Every move is designed to be untraceable. The cursed letter, the committee, the guardianship petition, all legal, all deniable, all tightening the noose. Then we cut the noose, Hermione said. She had Isolde scrolls spread across McGonagall's desk and was already translating the ritual requirements, her quill moving at a speed that made Daphne raise her eyebrows. I've identified the celestial alignment Isolde was referencing. It's a convergence of 3 planetary bodies, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars, that occurs in a specific configuration relative to the ley lines beneath Hogwarts. The next occurrence is, she checked her star chart. October 31st. The room went very quiet. Halloween, Harry said. Yes. Of course it's Halloween. He almost laughed. Everything happened to him on Halloween. His parents died on Halloween. The troll, the chamber, the goblet, all Halloween. The universe had a deeply irritating sense of thematic consistency. That gives us 26 days, Daphne said. She'd gone very still, calculating. We need to forge the anchor object, complete the translation, prepare the ritual space, and do all of this while Selwyn is actively trying to stop us. And while your curse is still progressing, Pomfrey added. She'd been standing by the door, monitoring Daphne since they'd arrived back. The attack today stressed your core significantly. The bond is compensating, but I'm seeing deterioration in the underlying matrix. You're losing ground, Miss Greengrass. The clinical words landed heavy. Daphne's expression didn't change, but Harry felt the impact through the bond, a cold spike of fear, quickly suppressed, quickly locked away. 26 days, Daphne repeated. Then we'd better start now. The room organized itself around the task. Hermione took ritual translation. Ron and Neville, who'd arrived at some point and simply inserted himself into the effort with a matter-of-factness that made Harry grateful, took political countermeasures, working with Cyrus's Wisengamot contacts to challenge the Heritage Committee's authority. Tracy took logistics, coordinating between all the moving pieces. And Harry and Daphne took the bond. Because that was what it came down to, in the end. The ritual required a willing, genuine merging of magic. Not forced. Not obligated. Genuine. And that meant the bond between them had to be real, not just magical, but emotional. They had to know each other. Trust each other. Choose each other. Which was how Harry Potter found himself walking the Hogwarts grounds at midnight with Daphne Greengrass, 40 feet of bond-mandated proximity between them and a sky full of stars above, talking about things he'd never told anyone. It started small. She asked about his childhood, not the famous parts, not the war, but the ordinary stuff. What it was like growing up with the Dursleys. What it felt like to be a wizard who didn't know he was a wizard. He told her about the cupboard under the stairs, and she stopped walking. A cupboard, she said. Until I was 11. Then I got Dudley's second bedroom. She stared at him. The moonlight caught her face, and the mask was thin, so thin he could see through it to the fury underneath. Not pity. Fury. On his behalf. I'm going to need a moment, she said, very precisely, to process the fact that the savior of the wizarding world was raised in a cupboard by muggles who, what? Hated him. They were afraid of me. Of magic. I don't think they knew how to handle it, so they just didn't. That's extraordinarily generous of you. I've had time to think about it. Being angry at the Dursleys is like being angry at the weather. It happened. It shaped me. I can't change it. She started walking again. They moved along the edge of the lake, the water black and still, the castle a distant constellation of lit windows behind them. My turn, Harry said. She tensed. He felt it through the bond, a tightening, a bracing. You don't have to. No. Fair is fair. She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was different. Younger. I remember the day my mother died. Not the details, I was 7, and the memories are unreliable. But I remember the feeling. Like something was being pulled out of me. The healers said I was too young to sense it, but I felt the curse activate. The moment she died and the malediction passed to me. I felt it settle into my blood like ice water. Harry said nothing. He walked beside her and listened. I was 12 when the first episode happened. Potions class, ironically. I started shaking and couldn't stop. Tracy got me to the hospital wing before anyone else noticed. Pomfrey ran diagnostics and then sat me down and told me what I already knew. I was going to die the same way my mother did. She paused. I went back to my dormitory and alphabetized my bookshelf. Then I organized my wardrobe by color. Then I wrote letters to my father and Astoria and sealed them for later. And then I built the wall. The Ice Queen. Yes. If no one gets close, no one gets hurt when I'm gone. Simple arithmetic. The corner of her mouth twisted. Tracy got through anyway. She's annoyingly persistent. I know the type. Daphne glanced at him. You do, don't you? Granger and Weasley. They never let you push them away. Believe me, I tried. I believe you. She stopped at the edge of the lake and sat down on the grass, and after a moment, Harry sat beside her. The bond hummed between them, warm and open, and the night was cold and clear and somehow, improbably, peaceful. I walked to my death, Harry said. She turned to look at him. What? In the forest. During the battle. I found out I was a Horcrux, that a piece of Voldemort's soul was inside me, and that the only way to destroy it was to let him kill me. So I walked into the forest and stood in front of him and let him cast the killing curse. He said it simply, the way you described something that happened to someone else. I didn't fight. I didn't run. I just stood there. Daphne was very still. Through the bond, he felt her reaction, not the ice he expected, but something molten and raw. Horror. Understanding. A recognition so deep it was almost painful. You chose to die, she said. Yeah. And you came back. Yeah. I don't fully understand how. Something about the blood magic, Dumbledore's plan, the Deathly Hallows, it's complicated and I'm not sure anyone really knows. But I was dead, and then I wasn't. What was it like? No one had asked him that. Not Ron, not Hermione, not Ginny, not anyone. They'd all skirted around it, afraid of the answer, afraid of what it meant. And here was Daphne Greengrass, who had been preparing for her own death since she was 12, asking with a directness that was almost clinical. Quiet, he said. It was quiet. No pain. No fear. Just, quiet. He pulled a blade of grass and turned it between his fingers. And then I had to choose to come back, and that was the hardest thing I've ever done. Because being dead was peaceful, and being alive meant more fighting, more pain, more people depending on me. I came back because I had to. Not because I wanted to. The silence between them was different now. Not the careful, calculated silence of two people managing a forced arrangement. Something honest. Something that came from two people who had both stood at the edge of the same cliff and understood what the drop felt like. I want to, Daphne said quietly. Come back, I mean. I want to live. I've spent 6 years pretending I'd made peace with dying, and it's a lie. I want to live. I want to see Astoria grow up. I want to finish my NEWTS and be furious about the results. I want to read every book in that vault. I want, her voice caught. I want to know what happens next. I've never been able to think past spring, and now you're here, and the bond is here, and there might be a future, and I don't know how to want something I was never supposed to have. Harry looked at her. Moonlight and shadows. The Ice Queen with her walls down, trembling not from the curse but from the weight of hope. You start by wanting it, he said. The rest, we figure out. She met his eyes. Held them. And then, very slowly, she leaned sideways until her shoulder touched his. Just that. Just a point of contact. But the bond between them blazed like sunrise, and the dark threads of the curse under her skin retreated, not gone, not beaten, but yielding, and her breathing eased, and her pulse slowed, and for one long, perfect moment, everything was quiet. They sat by the lake until the moon was high and the cold drove them back inside. They walked through the sleeping castle in silence, and it was a comfortable silence now, the silence of two people who have said the hard things and survived the saying. At the door to the suite, Daphne stopped. Harry. Yeah. 26 days. 26 days. She looked at him, and her expression was steady, and the mask was gone, and what was underneath it was fierce and frightened and determined and alive. I think we can do this, she said. I know we can. She nodded. Went to her room. Closed the door. Harry stood in the common room and pressed his hand to his chest and felt the double heartbeat, hers and his, finally, for the first time, beating in perfect sync. Then he went to bed, and for the first night since May, he slept without dreaming. Chapter 4, Breaking Point. 14 days before Halloween, Daphne Greengrass disappeared. Not dramatically. Not in the middle of the night with a packed bag and a farewell letter. She did it the way she did everything, precisely, quietly, with enough planning to make it stick. She left after breakfast on a Tuesday, told Tracy she was going to the library, told Harry she'd be back by lunch, and then walked out of the castle and was gone. Harry didn't notice for 2 hours. That was the part that ate at him afterward, 2 hours of sitting in the common room, reading Hermione's latest translation notes, feeling the bond hum steadily in his chest, before he realized the humming was getting fainter. He stood up. Pressed his hand to his sternum. The double heartbeat was there, but distant, like hearing music through a wall. Tracy. She looked up from the essay she was writing at the desk by the window. Where's Daphne? Library. she said. Tracy stopped. Her quill hovered over the parchment. She said she'd be back by lunch. It's 1:30. They looked at each other. Tracy's face went through a rapid sequence: confusion, realization, fury, and she was on her feet before Harry had reached the door. The library was empty. Madame Pants confirmed that Miss Greengrass had not visited today. They checked the restricted section, the hospital wing, the astronomy tower, the grounds. Nothing. Nobody had seen her leave. Nobody had noticed. That was the thing about the Ice Queen. She'd spent years making herself invisible when she wanted to be. People's eyes slid off her the same way they'd always slid off her mask: no purchase, no grip. Harry stood in the entrance hall and closed his eyes and reached for the bond. It was there. Faint, strained, but there, a thin golden thread stretching south. Not toward Hogsmeade. Farther. Much farther. And the thread was vibrating with a complex tangle of emotions he was learning to read: determination, fear, guilt, and underneath all of it, a resolve so hard and bright it was almost blinding. She'd made a decision. She'd made it alone. And she hadn't told him because she knew he'd stop her. "She's gone to the manor," Harry said. "That's impossible. The flu authorization requires 2 signatures since the attack. She can't, she didn't flu. She walked to Hogsmeade and Operaat from beyond the wards." He opened his eyes. "She's been planning this." Tracy's expression could have cracked stone. "That's stubborn, reckless, idiotic. She'll destabilize. At that distance from you, without the bond proximity, the curse will, I know." "Then why are you standing here?" Harry was already moving. He found Ron and Hermione in the courtyard. He didn't explain, there wasn't time, just said, "Daphne's gone, she's at her family's estate, I need to get there now." Ron didn't hesitate. Sighed along. "I passed my test last month." "Where's the manor?" "Wiltshire. Near Salisbury." "That's a long apparition. Can you do it?" Ron looked at him with an expression that was pure, stubborn Weasley loyalty. "Mate, I side-alonged Hermione out of the ministry when we were being chased by snatchers. I can handle Wiltshire." Hermione was already thinking 3 steps ahead. "You can't just barge in. If Selwyn has people watching the estate, then I'll deal with them." "Harry, Hermione. She's alone. The bond is stretched to its limit. Every minute I'm standing here, she's getting worse." Hermione pressed her lips together, then nodded. "Go. I'll alert McGonagall and contact Neville. We may need political cover if this escalates. Ron, bring him back in one piece." "Both of them," Ron said, and grabbed Harry's arm, and the world compressed into a tube of screaming darkness. They landed in a field a quarter-mile from Greengrass Manor. Harry staggered, caught himself, and immediately felt the bond surge, stronger here, the thread thickening from gossamer to rope, and through it, Daphne's presence blazed like a signal fire. She was in the house. She was in pain. And she was doing something with her magic that felt reckless and desperate and deliberately, carefully planned. "She's inside," Harry said. "Something's wrong." Ron had his wand out, scanning the tree line. No one in sight. Wards feel weird, though, shimmery. Like they've been layered. Harry felt it too. The estate's protections had been reinforced since their last visit, not with Greengrass magic, but with something colder, more clinical. Ministry-grade ward work. "Selwyn's people have been here," Harry said. "Or Selwyn's committee has inspected the wards and added their own. Legal authority, remember. Hermione said the guardianship provisions give them access. Meaning they can get in. Meaning they can get in whenever they want." Ron's jaw tightened. "And so can we. The wards won't stop you, you're bonded to a Greengrass. Just walk through." Harry walked. The wards parted for him like curtains, recognizing the thread of Daphne's magic woven through his core. Ron followed in his wake, close enough that the parted wards hadn't closed. Smart. Ron had always been smarter than people gave him credit for. The manor was quiet. Too quiet. The front door was intact, no explosion this time, but unlocked, which was wrong. Cyrus Greengrass would never leave the front door unlocked. They moved through the entrance hall. Harry followed the bond like a compass needle, through the drawing room, past the closed door of Alohan's sitting room, and down the cellar stairs to the vault entrance. The blood ward door was open. And inside, the blue-lit chamber was a mess. Books pulled from shelves. Scrolls unrolled across every surface. Runic diagrams chalked on the stone floor in patterns Harry didn't recognize but could feel, they thrummed with active magic, hot and unstable. And in the center of it all, kneeling in a circle of runes with her hands flat on the floor and her magic pouring out of her invisible streams of gold light, was Daphne. She looked terrible. The dark veins of the curse were visible on every inch of exposed skin, pulsing in a rhythm that was too fast, too erratic. Her face was gray with exhaustion, her hair loose and tangled, her robes damp with sweat. The gold light streaming from her hands was fractured, the same broken glass quality Harry had seen during her collapse in potions, but worse. Much worse. She was trying to perform the anchoring ritual alone. "No," Harry said. Not a shout. A word made of granite. Her head snapped up. Her eyes were glassy, fevered, and it took a moment for them to focus on him. When they did, the expression on her face was not relief. It was anguish. "You can't be here," she said. "You need to leave. Like hell. Harry, listen to me. I found another way. In the archives, a variation of the original anchoring technique Isolde used. It doesn't require a bonded partner. It requires the afflicted witch to overload the curse with her own magic, burn it out from the inside. If I can generate enough power, you'll kill yourself." "No. Maybe. The probability is," she swayed. The runes on the floor flickered. "The probability is acceptable." Acceptable. Harry crossed the vault in 4 strides and dropped to his knees outside the runic circle. "You left Hogwarts without telling anyone. You walked to Hogsmeade alone, operated across the country, how, by the way, with your core this unstable, carefully. And now you're trying to burn out a 600-year-old curse by overloading it with your own magic, which, according to everything we've read, is literally what feeds the curse in the first place." He stared at her. "This isn't a plan. This is suicide with extra steps." "It's not," she coughed. Blood flecked her lips. She wiped it away with the back of her hand, casual, like it was nothing, and Harry's heart seized. "Daphne. Stop. Please. I can't." Her voice cracked. "Not from pain, from something deeper. Don't you understand? The ritual, the real one, the soul bond, it takes your magic. Permanently. Your independence, your sovereignty, everything that makes you you. And I've been reading Isolde's notes, all of them, the ones I didn't show you, and the merged core state, it's not theoretical. It's been studied. By the Selwyns. They know exactly what happens when a soul bond completes, and what happens is that both parties become dependent. Not just magically. Emotionally. The bond deepens over time. You won't be able to be more than 100 feet from me for the rest of your life. You'll feel what I feel, every moment, every day. Your emotions will bleed into mine and mine into yours until neither of us can tell the difference." She was crying. Daphne Greengrass, who had not cried when she collapsed in potions, who had not cried when someone tried to kill her with a cursed letter, who had not cried when she was attacked on the road to Hogwarts, was crying, tears running down her grey, dark-veined face, and the mask was gone, shattered, and what was underneath was a girl who was terrified of what she was about to take from someone who didn't deserve it. I won't do that to you, she said. I won't trap you. You've spent your entire life being bound by prophecies and expectations and other people's plans, and I will not be another chain around your neck. I would rather die. The vault was silent except for the hum of the runes and the ragged sound of her breathing. Ron stood by the entrance, quiet, his wand lowered, his face drawn with the look of someone witnessing something private and painful. Harry looked at Daphne. Really looked. The blood on her lips. The veins under her skin. The tears on her cheeks. The magic pouring out of her, burning her alive from the inside, because she thought it was better than burdening him. And something in Harry's chest, not the bond, not the magic, something purely, entirely human, broke open. You think I don't know what the bond does? He said quietly. You can't, I read the same notes you did. The dependency, the emotional bleed, the proximity requirements, I read all of it. Last week, Hermione found the Selwyn research in the Department of Mysteries archives, and we went through it together, and I already knew everything you just told me. Daphne stared at him. You knew. I knew. And I didn't tell you, because I knew you'd do exactly this, run, and try to save me from myself, and die in the process. He reached across the runic circle and took her hands. Her fingers were ice-cold and slick with blood from where the runes had cut her palms. The bond flared at the contact, gold light wrapping around their joined hands, and the curse retreated from his touch like a living thing recoiling from fire. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't scare me, he said. The idea of never being independent again, yeah, that's terrifying. I've been alone my whole life. In a cupboard, in a castle full of people who wanted me to be something I wasn't, in a forest walking to my death. Alone is what I know. Alone is safe. He tightened his grip on her hands. But safe isn't the same thing as alive. And I spent the last 5 months going through the motions, eating, sleeping, attending classes, without feeling anything, because being numb was easier than dealing with what the war left behind. And then your magic reached out and grabbed mine, and suddenly I could feel again. Not just your heartbeat. Everything. The world got louder and brighter and harder and more real, and yeah, it hurt sometimes, but Daphne, I would rather feel everything for the rest of my life than go back to feeling nothing. She was shaking. The runes on the floor were dying, their light fading as her concentration broke, the half-formed anchoring ritual collapsing around her. The curse surged in a gap, dark veins crawling up her throat, reaching for her temples, and she gasped, and Harry pulled her forward, out of the runic circle, into his arms. The bond ignited. Gold light. Blinding, overwhelming, a tidal wave of magic that poured through the connection between them and slammed into the curse like a wall of fire hitting ice. The dark veins retreated. Daphne's body shuddered, then stilled. Her forehead pressed against his collarbone, and he could feel her breathing, ragged, desperate, then gradually, slowly, evening out. I hate you, she whispered against his shirt. No, you don't. No. I don't. A sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. That's the problem. Ron cleared his throat from the doorway. Not to interrupt the moment, but we've got company. Harry looked up. Ron was staring at the ceiling, and Harry could feel it too, a shift in the wards above them. Not a breach. An opening. Someone with authorized access was entering the estate. Selwyn, Daphne said, pulling back. Her face was still gray, still streaked with tears, but her eyes were clear and her jaw was set. He has committee access. If he knows I'm here, he knows. Harry was on his feet, pulling Daphne up with him. She swayed. He steadied her. The bond from between them, their magic tangled and raw from the failed ritual, and Harry could feel the power in it, the amplification Alderton had noticed in defense class, but deeper now, richer, fed by everything they'd just said to each other. How many? Harry asked Ron. Ron had his wand pressed to the ceiling, casting a detection charm. 4, no, 5. Coming through the front entrance. Moving fast. And Harry, one of them feels different. Bigger magical signature. Not a hireling. Selwyn himself, Daphne said. She was standing under her own power now, barely, and her wand was in her hand. He wouldn't come personally unless he was certain of the outcome. Then he's going to be disappointed. They moved up the stairs. Ron took point. He'd learned tactical movement during the war, and his long strides covered ground efficiently, wand sweeping corners, checking angles. Harry kept Daphne close, one hand on her arm, the bond pumping magic into her as fast as her depleted core could absorb it. The cellar door. The hallway. The drawing room. And there, standing in the entrance hall of Greengrass Manor with 4 operatives flanking him, was Marcus Selwyn. He was exactly as Harry had imagined, tall, well-built, with the kind of ageless good looks that came from wealth and careful grooming. Late 30s, maybe 40, with dark hair silvering at the temples and eyes that were the pale gray of winter ice. He wore ministry robes of deep charcoal, a Heritage Committee pin gleaming on his lapel, and his expression as Harry and Daphne emerged from the cellar was one of polished, manufactured concern. "Miss Greengrass," he said. "Thank heavens. When our monitoring charms detected unauthorized magical activity on the estate, we feared the worst." "Monitoring charms," Daphne said. Her voice could have frozen the air between them. "You placed monitoring charms on my family's home. Standard practice during a guardianship review. For your family's protection, of course." His eyes moved to Harry, and something behind the polished surface shifted, a flicker of calculation, quickly masked. "Mr. Potter. What a surprise. I wasn't aware you had authorization to be on Greengrass property. I'm bonded to the heir. I have standing access." "Ah, yes. The bond." Selwyn's smile was warm and utterly empty. "A remarkable development. I've been following the situation with great interest. The committee is deeply concerned about Miss Greengrass's welfare, particularly given the recent episodes. The formation of an involuntary soul bond with a student is, well, it raises questions about the Greengrass family's ability to manage their own affairs." "My affairs are my own, Selwyn," Daphne said. "Of course they are. But the committee has a mandate, Miss Greengrass. The magical heritage of old families must be preserved. And when a family is in crisis, the patriarch gravely ill, the heir afflicted with an incurable malediction, the estate's wards apparently unable to prevent unauthorized access," he gestured at Harry and Ron. "Well. You can see how it looks. It looks like you've manufactured a crisis to justify a takeover," Ron said. Selwyn's gaze shifted to Ron. The warmth in his expression dimmed by exactly 1 degree. "Mr. Weasley. I've always admired your family's passion for causes. It's charmingly earnest." Ron's ears went red, but he didn't take the bait. "Charmingly honest, is what it is. And what I'm honestly seeing is a ministry official with 5 armed escorts forcing his way into a private home. We didn't force anything. The committee has legal access. And my escorts are for personal protection. There have been attacks on this road recently, as I'm sure you're aware." Another warm, empty smile. "Now. I'm here to conduct a standard inspection." "If you'll step aside." "No," Harry said. The word landed in the entrance hall like a stone in a pond. Selwyn's smile held, but his eyes changed, the calculation surfacing, the mask thinning. "Mr. Potter, I understand this is an emotional situation. Let me tell you what I understand." Harry stepped forward. The bond was singing in his chest, Daphne's magic and his own woven together, amplifying, resonating. He could feel it in his wand arm, in his blood, in the air around him. Power. More than he'd ever felt alone. "I understand that the Selwyn family cursed the Greengrass bloodline in 1412 to harvest their magical energy. I understand that every Greengrass woman who dies of the malediction makes your family more powerful. I understand that you sent a cursed letter through official ministry post to accelerate Daphne's condition. I understand that you sent 3 operatives to attack us on a public road. And I understand that you're standing in this house right now, with 5 hired wands, because you're afraid that if the soul bond completes, your 600-year parasite operation ends. The entrance hall went silent. Selwyn's smile was gone. In its place was something older, colder, the face beneath the politician's mask, the face of a man whose family had been built on stolen power and who would do whatever was necessary to protect that foundation. Those are serious accusations, Mr. Potter, Selwyn said softly. I hope you have evidence to support them. We have Isolde Greengrass's research. We have the cursed letter, analyzed and documented. We have 3 operatives in Auror custody. And we have the testimony of 6 centuries of dead women. Research from a defunct archive. A letter with no traceable curse. Operatives who, I assure you, have no connection to me. And dead women who, tragically, succumbed to a well-documented hereditary condition. Selwyn's voice was smooth as silk and twice as cold. You'll forgive me if I'm not trembling. You should be, Daphne said. She stepped forward, and Harry felt her magic shift, not attacking, not yet, but gathering, pulling energy from the bond like drawing a bowstring. The air around her shimmered. You're in my house, Selwyn. On my family's land. Surrounded by wards that were forged by my ancestors, wards that recognize Greengrass blood and Greengrass will. Her voice was quiet and precise and utterly controlled, and the gold light of her magic was bleeding through her skin, visible at her fingertips, in her eyes. Your committee access opens the front door. It doesn't give you authority over what's behind it. Miss Greengrass, I urge you to be reasonable. I am being reasonable. Reasonable is standing here talking instead of letting the wards do what they want to do to an uninvited Selwyn on Greengrass soil. She raised her hand, palm up, and the gold light concentrated there, a sphere of pure magic, bright as a star, pulsing with the amplified power of the bond. Reasonable is giving you the chance to walk out. The 4 operatives shifted. Hands moved toward wands. Harry's wand was already out, and Ron's, and the 3 of them formed a line between Selwyn and the cellar stairs, between Selwyn and 600 years of evidence. Selwyn's eyes moved across the line. Calculated. Harry could almost see the math happening behind those pale gray eyes, 3 opponents, 2 of them bonded with amplified power, in a warded estate that favored the defenders. The numbers didn't work. Not today. Not like this. This isn't over, Selwyn said. No, Harry agreed. It isn't. Selwyn turned. His operatives fell in around him. He walked to the front door with the measured pace of a man who wanted it known that he was choosing to leave, not being forced. At the door, he stopped. The committee review is in 11 days, Miss Greengrass. If your family cannot demonstrate stable management of its affairs by then, the guardianship will proceed. That is not a threat. It is the law. He left. The door closed. The ward sealed behind him with a sound like a sigh. Daphne's knees buckled. Harry caught her. The gold light winked out, and she sagged against him, all the strength she'd poured into that display draining out of her at once. The dark veins surged, not as badly as before, the bond holding them in check, but visibly, sickeningly. That was incredibly stupid, Harry said, lowering her to the floor. Magnificent, but stupid. Runs in the family, she managed. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. The vaults are safe. The vaults are safe. Good. Because I left, in my satchel, the complete ritual translation. I finished it before you arrived. The anchoring attempt was a backup plan. In case the ritual didn't, she broke off, coughing. Ron picked up the leather satchel from where it had fallen near the cellar door. He opened it and pulled out a sheaf of parchment covered in Daphne's precise handwriting. This is the full ritual, he said. Every step. Every requirement. Every constraint. Daphne opened her eyes and looked at Harry. I was going to send it to Hermione. Before I started the anchoring attempt. So you'd have it even if you died. Even if the anchoring didn't work. That's the same thing and you know it. She didn't argue. She was too tired to argue. Through the bond, Harry felt her defenses crumble, not the mask, which was already gone, but something deeper. The last wall. The one she'd built between herself and the possibility that someone else might share the weight. I'm sorry, she said. For leaving. For not telling you. I know what you thought. That if I could solve it alone, you wouldn't have to sacrifice anything. That I could save you from having to choose. Daphne. He shifted her so she could see his face. I already chose. I chose in the hospital wing when I said I'd help. I chose at the lake when I told you about the forest. I chose on the road to Hogsmeade when I fought beside you. I've been choosing you, every single day, and you keep trying to give me an exit I don't want. Her eyes searched his. Whatever she found there made the last of the resistance go out of her like a held breath finally released. Okay, she said softly. Okay. No more running. No more running. And no more hiding things from each other. I'll show you mine if you show me yours. He paused. That came out wrong. She laughed. It was weak and thin and dissolved into another cough, but it was real, the most genuine laugh he'd heard from her, raw and surprised and tinged with the particular helplessness of someone who hadn't expected to find something funny at this exact moment. You're impossible, Potter. Harry. You're impossible, Harry. Ron was reading the ritual notes, his brow furrowed in concentration. Hermione needs to see this. Some of this notation, I think it's the anchor specifications. She was working on those yesterday. We need to get back to Hogwarts, Harry said. Can you carry her through side-along? I'll carry you both. But we should go from outside the wards. Less interference. Ron tucked the parchment into his robes and moved to the door, already planning the route. Harry stood, lifting Daphne with him. She protested weakly, I can walk, Potter, but she couldn't, not really, and she stopped protesting when he shifted her weight against his side and the bond flowed between them, gold warmth easing the curse's grip, steadying her breathing. They made it out of the house and across the grounds. Cyrus met them at the gate. He'd been in the West Wing, monitoring the confrontation through the estate's ward network, unable to intervene but watching everything. She found the ritual, Harry told him. Cyrus looked at his daughter, pale, drained, barely conscious, held upright by a boy she'd known for 2 weeks. Something passed across his face that was too complex for a single word. Grief and gratitude and hope and the bone-deep weariness of a man who'd been fighting a losing battle for 18 years. Take care of her, he said. I will. And Harry, the committee review. Selwyn will use it to seize control if we can't demonstrate stability. You have 11 days. The ritual is on Halloween. That's 12 days. 1 day's margin. Not much. It's enough. Harry looked at Daphne, who was drifting toward unconsciousness against his shoulder, her breathing slow and deep, the bond cradling her like a net of woven light. It has to be. Ron took them both through side-along, and the world compressed and screamed, and they landed in the field outside Hogsmeade under a sky full of stars. Back at Hogwarts, things moved fast. Hermione took the ritual translation and disappeared into her room for 6 hours. When she emerged, her eyes were bright with the particular intensity that meant she'd cracked something. The anchor object, she said, spreading diagrams across the common room table. It needs to be metal, silver, specifically, alloyed with components of both your magical signatures. I can brew the necessary potion to imbue the silver, but I need something personal from each of you. Not just hair or blood, something that carries emotional weight. A memory made physical. Made physical how? Harry asked. Pensive extraction. You each extract a memory, a significant one, a defining one, and I incorporate it into the alloy. The anchor then carries the emotional signature of the bond, not just the magical one. What kind of memory? Hermione hesitated. The more significant, the stronger the anchor. Ideally, the most important memory you have. The one that made you who you are. Harry and Daphne looked at each other across the table. The bond hummed between them, and they both knew, without saying it, which memories those would be. The forest, Harry said. My mother, Daphne said. Hermione nodded. I'll prepare the extraction tomorrow. The anchor will take 3 days to forge. That leaves us 8 days for preparation, plus the ritual itself on Halloween. She looked between them. This is going to work. Neville arrived with news on the political front. His grandmother had pulled strings at the Wizengamot, and the Heritage Committee's charter was under review. It won't stop the guardianship hearing, he said, but it'll force them to conduct it publicly, in front of the full Wizengamot, not behind closed doors. Selwyn wanted a quiet administrative ruling. He's going to get a public spectacle instead. Good, Daphne said. She was sitting up, color returning, the bond's proximity doing its work. Selwyn's power is in the shadows. Force him into the light, and his position weakens. I've also been in contact with 3 other old families who've had interactions with the Heritage Committee, Neville continued. The Abbotts, the Macmillans, and the Bones. None of them like what Selwyn's doing. If we can build a coalition, a political coalition of old families opposing a ministry committee. Daphne's eyes were sharp, calculating, and for the first time, Harry saw the politician in her, the girl who'd grown up in a world of alliances and leverage and careful maneuvering. That's not just defense. That's an offensive position. If enough families push back against the committee's authority, the committee collapses, Hermione finished. And Selwyn loses his institutional cover. He'll still have the curse, Daphne said. Even if we strip his political power, the Selwyn family magic, the accumulated stolen energy, that remains. One fight at a time, Harry said. The next 11 days were the most focused, intense, purposeful days Harry had experienced since the war. And unlike the war, which had been marked by confusion, fear, and the constant weight of a destiny he hadn't chosen, this felt right. Chosen. Deliberate. Every action aimed at a clear objective, every person playing to their strengths. Hermione forged the anchor. It was a pair of rings, simple silver bands, each one imbued with a memory extracted in the quiet of the hospital wing under Pomfrey's supervision. Harry's memory of the forest went in like liquid light, silver white and heavy. Daphne's memory of her mother was gold and sharp and so painful that she had to look away when Hermione drew it from her temple. The rings, when finished, hummed with a warmth that was distinct from the bond but connected to it. Harry wore his on his right hand. Daphne wore hers on her left. And when they were both wearing them, the bond between them intensified, not painfully, but noticeably, a deepening of the connection that made Harry feel, for the first time, what the completed bond would actually be like. He could feel her thoughts. Not words, impressions, colors, textures. When she was happy, his chest felt light. When she was afraid, his stomach tightened. When she was working on something complex, he felt a pleasant hum of concentration that wasn't his own. It was intimate in a way that went beyond anything physical, and it should have been terrifying. It wasn't. It felt like coming home. They practiced the ritual casting. Alderton gave them the defense classroom in the evenings, warding it to contain the amplified magic. The shared casting required perfect synchronization, both wands moving in identical patterns, both incantations spoken in unison, both cores opening simultaneously. It was like learning a dance where a misstep could shatter windows. The first attempt blew out every torch in the room. The second cracked the floor. The third, when they stopped thinking about the technique and just let the bond guide them, produced a column of intertwined gold and silver light that reached the ceiling and held there, steady and bright, for 30 seconds before they let it fade. Better, Daphne said. Is that your version of, that was amazing? It was adequate. She means amazing, Tracy called from the corner, where she was reading a magazine and pretending not to watch. Shut up, Tracy. Ron worked the political angle with Neville, drafting formal objections to the Heritage Committee's authority that were co-signed by half a dozen old families. Hermione prepared a legal brief challenging the guardianship petition on 14 separate grounds. And Tracy, quiet, overlooked Tracy, did something none of them had thought to do. She wrote to Astoria. Astoria Greengrass was 16, a sixth-year Slytherin with her sister's intelligence and none of her reserve. She arrived at the 7th-floor suite 3 days before Halloween with a trunk, a cat, and a look on her face that could have started fires. "You absolute idiot," she said to Daphne, and hugged her so hard that Daphne staggered. "Astoria, 6 years. 6 years you've been hiding this from me. You let me think you were just cold and distant and didn't care about anything, and the whole time you were dying and didn't tell me because you thought you were protecting me." Astoria pulled back. Her eyes were red but her voice was fierce. "I'm your sister. Protecting you is my job too." Daphne opened her mouth, closed it, and then did something Harry had never seen her do. She crumbled. Not the mask, not the walls, those had been down for days. The foundation. The bedrock assumption that she had to carry this alone, that love meant sparing people from your pain. It crumbled, and Daphne Greengrass held her little sister and cried, really cried, for the first time in years. Harry left them alone. Some things didn't need a witness. He found Ron on the common room sofa, writing a letter. "Mum," Ron said, not looking up. "She wants to know if Daphne likes treacle tart." "Why?" "Because Mum's decided that anyone bonded to you is family, and family gets fed. She's already knitting a jumper." Ron glanced up. "Don't tell Daphne about the jumper. Let it be a surprise." Harry sat down. The fire crackled. Through the bond, he could feel Daphne's tears, not pain, but release, a dam breaking that should have broken years ago. And underneath it, growing stronger every moment, a warmth that he'd started calling by its proper name. "Ron." "Yeah. I think I'm in love with her." Ron put down his quill. Looked at Harry for a long moment. Then he smiled, not his usual grin, but something quieter, something that had the weight of years and battles and friendship behind it. "Yeah, mate," he said. "I know." The night before Halloween, Harry and Daphne sat in the common room after everyone else had gone to bed. The fire was low. The rings hummed on their fingers. The bond between them was wide open, a river of shared warmth, and for once, neither of them was fighting it. "Scared?" Harry asked. "Terrified," Daphne said. "You?" "Same." She leaned into him. His arm went around her shoulders. The bond sang. "Harry." "Yeah. If this works, if we complete the ritual and the curse goes dormant, I want you to know that what I feel isn't the bond. It's not magical dependency or proximity-induced attachment or any of the clinical terms Pomfrey uses." She turned her face up to his. "It's you. Just you. The boy who laughed when I disarmed him. The boy who walked into a forest to die and came back because the world needed him. The boy who chose me, every day, when I kept trying to make him stop." Harry looked at her. Moonlight through the window. Blue eyes. No mask. "Blue," he said. "What?" "Your favorite color. You told me, and I remember." He smiled. "I remember everything." She kissed him. It was brief and soft and tasted like tea and salt and something electric, and the bond between them exploded into light, gold and silver, intertwined, filling the room, filling them, a preview of what tomorrow would bring. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright, and the dark veins under her skin had retreated to their faintest lines. "Tomorrow," she said. "Tomorrow." She went to her room. Harry sat in the glow of the dying fire and felt the double heartbeat in his chest, hers and his, perfectly synchronized, two rhythms become one, and knew, with a certainty that went deeper than magic, that whatever happened tomorrow, he would not lose her. He would not lose her. Chapter 5, Soulbound. Halloween morning came in cold and grey, fog rolling off the lake like the breath of something ancient, and Harry Potter woke to the sound of his own heartbeat, both of them. He lay in bed for a moment, feeling it. His rhythm and Daphne's, threaded together, steady and synchronized. 12 hours from now, that connection would either become permanent or it would fail, and the girl on the other side of the wall would begin dying in earnest. There was no middle ground. No backup plan. No third option. He got up. Dressed. Opened his door. Daphne was already in the common room, sitting cross-legged on the sofa with the ritual notes spread across her lap. She was wearing a jumper he hadn't seen before, dark blue, slightly too large, and her hair was down, loose around her shoulders. She looked up when he came in, and her expression was calm in a way that wasn't the mask. It was the calm of someone who had stopped fighting the current and decided to swim. "You're up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep." "Liar. You slept fine." "I felt it." He smiled. "Okay. I slept fine. But I woke up early." "So did I." She shifted the notes to make room for him on the sofa. He sat. Their shoulders touched. The bond hummed. "I've been going through the ritual sequence one more time. Hermione's translation is flawless. She caught 2 errors in my Latin that would have destabilized the casting circle. Don't tell her that. She'll be insufferable." "I already told her." She was insufferable. It was oddly charming. Daphne turned a page. "The timing is precise. We begin at moonrise, 7:48 p.m., and the casting window is 43 minutes. The celestial alignment peaks at 8:14 and begins degrading by 8:31. If we haven't completed the merging by then, the ambient magic won't be sufficient to sustain the core restructuring. 43 minutes. 43 minutes to merge 2 magical cores that have been independent for 18 years. Yes. She looked at him sideways. Having second thoughts? Having first thoughts? I skipped straight to, yes, and never went back to think about it properly. And now that you're thinking about it properly? Still yes. The corner of her mouth curved. Not quite a smile. Something better, something private and warm that was just for him. Good. Because the rings are already imbued, the ritual space is prepared, and Hermione will actually murder us both if we back out after the amount of work she's put in. Hermione's wrath. The real motivator. I've seen her revision schedules. The woman is terrifying. They sat together in the grey morning light, going through the ritual one more time, and the common room was quiet, and the castle was waking up around them, and it felt, impossibly, absurdly, like any other morning. 2 people on a sofa, reading notes, shoulders touching. Ordinary. The most extraordinary ordinary Harry had ever known. Tracy emerged at 7, took one look at them, and went to make tea without a word. Astoria followed at 7:30, red-eyed from a night of not sleeping, and planted herself in the armchair across from them with her cat in her lap and a look on her face that dared the universe to try something. "What's the plan for today?" Astoria asked. "Classes until 4. Preparation from 4 to 7. Ritual at moonrise." Daphne's voice was steady. "There's a Wisengamot session at noon, the Heritage Committee review. Neville and Ron are handling it." "And Selwyn?" Daphne and Harry exchanged a glance. This was the part they'd discussed late into the previous night, after the kiss, after the fire burned low, through the bond and impressions and half-formed thoughts rather than words. "Selwyn knows about the ritual," Harry said. "He has to. His monitoring charms on the Greengrass estate would have detected Daphne's magical activity in the vault, and his people have been watching the castle. He knows what we're planning, and he knows when. So he'll try to stop it, Astoria said. He'll try. The question is how. Harry leaned forward. He can't attack Hogwarts directly, even Voldemort needed an army for that. He can't use the committee to block us, the guardianship hasn't been granted yet. His options are limited. Limited isn't zero, Tracy said, bringing in a tray of tea. He's had 2 weeks to plan. And he's smart. He is, Daphne agreed. But he's also desperate. The completed bond ends the siphon permanently. 6 centuries of accumulated power, cut off in one night. He won't just be losing a food source, he'll be losing the foundation of his family's magical strength. Everything the Selwyns have built is mortared with stolen Greengrass magic. So what does a desperate, intelligent man do when his power source is about to be severed? Harry said. Silence. Then Astoria, quiet and fierce, he takes what he can before it's gone. Yes. Harry met her eyes. He'll try to drain as much of Daphne's magic as possible before the ritual completes. If he can weaken her enough, the ritual fails. If it fails, the curse accelerates, she dies, and he gets the full transfer, Tracy finished. Maximum harvest. The word sat in the room like something rotting. Then we don't let him get close, Daphne said. The ritual space is the room of requirement, Hermione suggested it. The room can configure itself as a perfect confluence chamber, drawing directly on the ley lines beneath the castle. And it has one entrance. One door. Defensible. Who's on the door? Tracy asked. Everyone who isn't in the ritual. Harry looked at her. You, Astoria, Ron, Hermione, Neville. And anyone else who wants to stand with us. Tracy's chin lifted. I've been standing with her since we were 11. I'm not stopping now. Astoria stroked her cat. The cat purred. Astoria's eyes were dry and hard. Same. The morning passed in a strange combination of normalcy and countdown. Harry and Daphne went to classes, charms, transfiguration, because Daphne insisted on it, because routine was her armor and she wasn't going to spend her last normal day hiding in a room waiting for moonrise. Harry didn't argue. He understood. The morning he'd walked into the forest, he'd eaten breakfast first. In charms, they sat together. Flitwick was teaching advanced animation, making objects move with independent purpose, and Harry noticed that Daphne's spellwork was sharper than usual, each wand movement precise and economical, as if she was savoring the feel of her magic moving through her wand in the uncomplicated way it did during ordinary spellcasting. As if she was saying goodbye to something. He reached under the desk and took her hand. She startled, a tiny flinch, barely visible, and then her fingers laced through his and held on. At noon, the Wizengamot convened. Harry and Daphne weren't there, they had transfiguration, but the news filtered back through a series of Patronus messages from Neville that arrived at 15-minute intervals like dispatches from a front line. The first, Selwyn presented the guardianship petition. Strong opening. Committee backing unanimous. The second, Hermione's legal brief entered into record. 14 objections. Selwyn's solicitor was not prepared for this. The third, Abbott, Macmillan, and Bones families formally opposed. Coalition holding. Selwyn arguing emergency authority. The fourth, arriving just as transfiguration ended, Wizengamot voted to table the guardianship pending full investigation. Selwyn lost. He looked furious. Be careful tonight. Daphne read the last message and closed her eyes. Through the bond, Harry felt a wave of relief so intense it made his chest ache, not just for herself, but for her father, whose estate and legacy had been one vote away from falling into the hands of the man who'd been killing his family for 600 years. It's not over, she said. The guardianship is tabled, not dismissed. But it buys time. It buys more than time. It strips Selwyn's institutional cover. If the investigation turns up evidence of the curse's Selwyn origins, if Her eyes opened. He'll destroy evidence. He'll have started already. Then we make sure the ritual succeeds tonight, and the curse goes dormant, and the siphon stops, and Selwyn's power base starts to crumble whether he has institutional cover or not. She nodded. Took a breath. Squared her shoulders. 4 o'clock, she said. Time to prepare. The room of requirement opened for them on the 7th floor, responding to a need that was older and deeper than anything Harry had ever asked of it. The door appeared in the blank wall, heavy oak, carved with symbols that Harry didn't recognize but Daphne did. Ley line markers, she said, running her fingers over the carvings. The room is drawing directly on the confluence. I can feel it. She pushed the door open, and what lay beyond was not a room. It was a chamber. Circular, vast, with a domed ceiling that showed the sky, not a charmed ceiling like the Great Hall, but the actual sky, open to the heavens, stars already appearing in the deep blue of evening despite it being only 4 o'clock. The floor was stone, polished to a mirror finish, and carved into it was a runic circle 20 feet in diameter. The runes glowed faintly, not with active magic, but with potential, like kindling waiting for a spark. At the center of the circle were 2 positions, marked in silver and gold. Side by side. Close enough to touch. The room knows what we need, Hermione said from behind them. She'd arrived with Ron, both of them still in their formal robes from the Wizengamot session. I specified the confluence requirements in my request, but the runic work, that's the room itself. It's drawing on the castle's foundational magic. Will it be enough? Harry asked. Hermione looked at the circle, at the glowing runes, at the sky above. Hogwarts was built by the 4 most powerful witches and wizards of their age on the most potent confluence point in Britain. Yes. It will be enough. They spent 3 hours preparing. Hermione walked Harry and Daphne through the ritual sequence until they could recite it in their sleep, the incantations, the wand movements, the precise moment when they would need to activate the rings and open their cores to each other. Ron and Neville set up defensive wards around the room's entrance, layered and overlapping, designed to slow anyone trying to force their way in. Tracy and Astoria prepared medical supplies, potions, healing drafts, stabilizing charms, because the ritual would stress both their bodies significantly, and if something went wrong, they'd need help fast. At 6:30, McGonagall arrived. She stood in the doorway of the room of requirement and looked at the circle, the runes, the open sky, and the 2 18-year-olds standing in the center of it all, and her expression was one Harry had seen only once before, the night of the battle, when she'd looked at the castle's defenders and known that some of them wouldn't survive. The wards are reporting unusual activity at the school's perimeter, she said. Multiple magical signatures, disillusioned, moving toward the castle from the south. The room went still. How many? Harry asked. 12. Perhaps more. The disillusionment makes accurate counting difficult. McGonagall's voice was clipped and precise, the voice of a woman who had defended this castle before and would do so again. I've alerted the staff. Flitwick, Sprout, and Alderton are securing the main entrances. The students have been moved to the Great Hall under Slughorn's supervision. Selwyn, Daphne said. Almost certainly. He cannot enter the castle without invitation, but the grounds are another matter. And if his intent is to disrupt the ritual, he doesn't need to enter the castle. He needs to enter the room. Harry turned to Ron. The defensive wards, strong, but not unbreakable. If Selwyn's people get into the castle, they can reach this corridor. We need to hold the 7th floor. We'll hold it. Neville stepped forward. He'd changed out of his Wizengamot robes into something practical, boots, a wand holster, the kind of clothing you wore when you expected to fight. The sword of Gryffindor was not at his hip, it appeared when it was needed, not before, but the readiness in his stance said he didn't expect to wait long. Ron, Tracy, Astoria, and me on the corridor. Hermione inside the room to monitor the ritual. Professor, the perimeter. The perimeter is mine, McGonagall said, and the steel in her voice could have cut glass. "No one enters this school without my knowledge and consent. Not tonight." She swept out. The door closed behind her, and the room was quiet except for the hum of the runes and the distant, growing sound of the wind outside. 7 o'clock. The sky through the open dome was darkening, stars multiplying, the first thin edge of the moon visible above the eastern horizon. The runes on the floor pulsed brighter. The confluence was stirring. Harry and Daphne stood at the center of the circle. The rings on their fingers were warm, humming with the memories they carried, Harry's forest, Daphne's mother. The bond between them was wide open, every barrier down, and Harry could feel Daphne's heartbeat as clearly as his own, and her fear, and her hope, and the fierce, blazing love she'd stopped trying to hide. "Whatever happens," she said, "thank you. For choosing this. For choosing me. Thank you for letting me." She almost smiled. "I didn't let you. You were extremely pushy about it." "Gryffindor." "Yes. That." She took his hand. The rings touched. Gold light and silver light spiraled up from the contact point, intertwining. "Ready? Ready." 7:48 p.m. Moonrise. The sky split open. Not literally, the moon crested the horizon in the ordinary way moons do, round and white and ancient, but the magic that followed was anything but ordinary. The confluence beneath Hogwarts ignited. Harry felt it in his bones, in his blood, in the marrow of his magic, a surge of ambient power so vast it was like standing in the ocean and feeling the tide come in. The runes on the floor blazed to life, gold and silver and white, and the circle became a pillar of light that reached from the floor through the open dome and into the sky. Daphne raised her wand. Harry raised his. They began. The incantation was in Old English, the words heavy and round in Harry's mouth, each syllable a shaped piece of magic that fit into the pattern like a stone into a wall. Daphne spoke beside him, her voice threading through his, the two of them weaving a spell that was less like casting and more like singing, two melodies finding harmony, two rivers joining. The first phase was the opening. Their cores, already connected by the bond, had to be deliberately unshielded, every protection, every instinctive guard, stripped away, leaving their magic naked and exposed. It was the most vulnerable thing Harry had ever done. More vulnerable than walking into the forest. More vulnerable than dying. Because dying had only risked his body. This risked his self, the deepest, most fundamental part of what made him Harry Potter. He felt Daphne's core open. It was like watching a flower bloom and fast forward, layers of protection peeling back to reveal the bright, sharp, precise magic at her center. Gold light, shot through with veins of dark where the curse lived, pulsing with the heartbeat of a girl who had spent her whole life building walls and was now, deliberately, tearing them down. His core opened in response. And what poured out surprised him. Not the raw, untamed power he'd expected, the magic that had defeated Voldemort through stubbornness and luck and a connection to people he loved. What poured out was quieter than that. Deeper. A magic that was fundamentally about protection, about standing between the people he loved and the things that wanted to hurt them. A magic that had been shaped, from the very first moment Lily Potter threw herself between her son and a killing curse, by love. The two cores met. Gold and silver. Precision and passion. Ice and fire. The rings flared. The memories they carried, the forest, the mother, rose like ghosts, visible in the light, playing out in miniature above their joined hands. Harry saw himself walking through the trees, saw the resurrection stone, saw his parents and Sirius and Remus walking beside him. Daphne saw her mother's face, heard her voice, felt the hand that had held hers in the last moments. And then the memories merged, the way the cores were merging, two stories becoming one story, two lives flowing together like rivers into the sea. Harry. Hermione's voice, sharp with alarm, from the edge of the circle. The wards on the corridor, they're under attack. He heard it distantly, through the roar of magic around them. Spellfire in the corridor outside. Shouts. The crash of hexes hitting stone. Ron's voice, bellowing something. Neville's, calm and commanding. The fight had started. "Don't stop," Daphne said through gritted teeth. The merging was pulling at her, pulling at both of them, a gravitational force that demanded total focus. The curse was fighting back, the dark veins surging, trying to reassert themselves as her core opened, trying to feed on the exposed magic. "Harry, don't stop." He didn't stop. He poured more into the bond, more magic, more intention, more of himself, and the merging deepened, and the light intensified, and the runes on the floor sang a note so deep and resonant that it vibrated in Harry's teeth. The door of the room of requirement shattered inward. Selwyn stood in the breach, flanked by two operatives, his wand raised and his face twisted into something that was no longer polished or composed. The politician was gone. What remained was the heir of Aldrich Selwyn, a man whose power was built on stolen blood, watching that power slip through his fingers in real time. "Stop the ritual," he said. His voice was tight and controlled. "Stop it now, or I will." Ron was behind him in the corridor, bleeding from a cut above his eye, exchanging spells with 3 more operatives. Neville was down the hall, dueling 2 at once, the sword of Gryffindor somehow in his hand, its blade ringing against a conjured shield. Tracy had her back to the wall, firing hexes with mechanical precision. Astoria, 16 years old, fierce as a wildfire, was holding a doorway by herself, her wand ablur. They'd held as long as they could. But Selwyn had brought more than 12. "Hermione," Harry said, without taking his eyes off Selwyn, without dropping his wand, without releasing Daphne's hand. "On it." Hermione stepped between the ritual circle and Selwyn, her wand raised, and her expression was the one that had faced Death Eaters in the Department of Mysteries, that had survived Malfoy Manor, that had walked into a war and come out the other side with scars and steel and an absolute refusal to be moved. "You're in a school," Hermione said to Selwyn. "Attacking students. In front of witnesses. Even your solicitor can't spin this. I'm here on committee authority, responding to reports of dangerous magical activity. The committee's authority was suspended by the Wisengamot 6 hours ago. You have no legal standing here. You are trespassing." Selwyn's jaw clenched. The mask slipped further. "Step aside, Miss Granger." "No." He raised his wand. Hermione raised hers. And in the space between them, the air crackled with intent. Harry couldn't help her. The ritual demanded everything, every scrap of focus, every thread of magic, every ounce of will. Releasing Daphne's hand now, with their cores half-merged, would not just stop the ritual. It would shatter both of them. The unfinished merging would collapse, and the backlash could destroy their magical cores entirely. He had to trust Hermione. He had to trust his friends. He had to do the hardest thing he'd ever done, stand still and let other people fight for him. Daphne's hand tightened on his. Through the bond, he felt her understanding. Her own fierce desire to turn and fight, clamped down by the same necessity. They were in this together, and together meant being vulnerable while the people they loved held the line. Selwyn fired. A dark curse, purple-black, aimed not at Hermione but past her, at the ritual circle. Hermione deflected it with a shield charm so powerful it sent the reflected curse into the ceiling, blasting a hole through the stone. Rubble rained down. Hermione didn't flinch. "You'll have to do better than that," she said. Selwyn's 2 operatives moved to flank her. Hermione fought them both, one hand casting shields, the other firing hexes, her footwork quick and precise, her face set in concentration. She was outnumbered and outflanked, and she held. She held because she was Hermione Granger, and holding impossible positions against impossible odds was what she did. But Selwyn wasn't focused on Hermione. He was focused on Harry and Daphne, and his wand was moving in a pattern that Harry recognized, not a combat spell, but something older, something ritual. He was reaching for the curse. For the siphon. Harry felt it. A cold tendril of magic, sliding through the air like a snake, reaching for Daphne's exposed core. Not attacking, feeding. Drawing on the same dark channel that the Selwyn curse had used for 600 years, the channel that connected every dying Greengrass woman to the Selwyn bloodline. Daphne gasped. The dark veins flared. He's trying to drain me, she said. Through the curse. He's pulling my magic through the siphon, Harry. If he draws enough power before the merging completes, he won't. Harry gripped her hand harder. Look at me. Daphne, look at me. She looked. Her eyes were wide with pain and fear and something else, trust. Complete, unconditional trust, the kind she'd never given anyone, the kind that had cost her everything to learn. The merging is almost complete, he said. Our cores are 90% fused. We just need to finish. Whatever he's pulling, we can pull harder. Together. Together, she repeated. They turned inward. Into the bond. Into each other. The second phase of the ritual was the sacrifice, not of life, but of sovereignty. The deliberate, irrevocable choice to make their magic shared. It couldn't be taken. It couldn't be forced. It had to be given, freely and completely, by both parties simultaneously. Harry opened his core. Not partway. Not cautiously. All the way. Every wall, every guard, every instinct that said keep something back, protect yourself, don't give everything because everything is all you have. He opened it all and let Daphne in. She did the same. And what met him on the other side of her walls was not the Ice Queen. Not the mask. Not the composed, untouchable girl who'd spent 6 years preparing to die. It was Daphne, raw, real, blazing with a magic that was fierce and precise and beautiful, and a heart that loved so hard it had nearly killed her to contain it. The cores merged. It was not gentle. It was not subtle. It was a supernova in the space behind their ribs, two magical cores colliding, fusing, restructuring into something new. Something that was neither Harry nor Daphne but both, a combined entity that was deeper and stronger and more resilient than either of them alone. The light that erupted from their joined hands was blinding, gold and silver woven so tightly they became a single color, a single light, a single voice singing a note that shook the foundations of the castle. The curse screamed. Harry felt it die. Not gradually, not in stages, it simply ended, the dark veins evaporating, the cold malice dissolving, the 600-year siphon severing with a snap that resonated through every stone in Hogwarts. The channel between the Greengrass bloodline and the Selwyn family collapsed, and the stolen magic that had sustained it, centuries of accumulated power, began to unravel. Across the room, Selwyn staggered. His face went white. His wand hand shook. And from somewhere on his person, a pocket, a hidden compartment, something cracked. The ornate box. The one with the heartbeat. Harry couldn't see it, but he could feel it through the bond's new, expanded awareness, a dark artifact, very old, shattering from the inside as the power that sustained it was ripped away. No, Selwyn said. His voice was thin. No, that's not. The light from the ritual circle expanded outward in a shockwave. Hermione threw herself flat. The operatives were blown off their feet. Selwyn hit the wall and slid down it, his wand clattering away, his expensive robes torn, and on his face was the expression of a man watching everything he'd built collapse into rubble. The light faded. The runes dimmed. The sky through the open dome was full of stars, and the moon was high and white, and the room of requirement was quiet. Harry was on his knees. Daphne was on hers. Their hands were still clasped, and the rings on their fingers were no longer humming, they were warm and still and settled, like hearthstones after a fire. The bond between them was different. Not the fragile, flickering thread it had been. Not the singing, surging river of the last 2 weeks. Something calmer. Deeper. Bedrock. He could feel her. Every part of her. Her magic, woven through his so completely that he couldn't tell where his ended and hers began. Her emotions, relief, exhaustion, disbelief, joy, flowing through him like his own. Her heartbeat, synchronized with his in a way that was no longer a connection between two separate rhythms but a single beat, shared. "Is it done?" she whispered. Harry looked at her. The dark veins were gone. Not retreated, not dormant, gone. Her skin was clear, flushed with color, alive in a way he'd never seen it. Her eyes were the same dark blue, but brighter now, lit from within by a magic that was no longer fractured. "It's done," he said. She let out a breath that sounded like it had been held for 6 years. Then she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his, and they stayed like that, kneeling in the center of a runic circle in the room of requirement, while the world rearranged itself around what they'd just done. Ron appeared in the doorway, limping, bleeding, grinning. "Everyone alive?" "Everyone's alive," Hermione said. She was sitting against the wall with her wand still in her hand and her hair wild and her expression dazed. "Is the corridor clear?" "Neville's got the last of them tied up." "Literally tied up." "With vines." "He's getting very creative with herbology applications." Ron looked at Harry and Daphne, still kneeling, still forehead to forehead. "So. Did it work?" Harry lifted his hand, the one wearing the ring, and felt the magic in him respond. Not his magic. Not Daphne's. Theirs. A wellspring of combined power that rose at his call and settled at his will, deep and steady and immense. "Yeah," he said. "It worked." Ron's grin widened. "Wicked." Selwyn was taken into custody by McGonagall, who arrived at the room of requirement with Flitwick and Alderton flanking her and an expression that could have cowed a dragon. The headmistress looked at the shattered door, the unconscious operatives, the ruined ritual circle, and the 2 students kneeling in the center of it, and her lips pressed into a line so thin it nearly disappeared. "Mr. Selwyn," she said. "You are under arrest for trespass, assault of students, and conspiracy to commit murder through magical means. The Aurors are en route. I suggest you remain silent." Selwyn, slumped against the wall with the shattered remains of his family's dark artifact in his pocket and the foundation of his power crumbling beneath him, said nothing. There was nothing to say. The politician in him was already calculating, solicitors, defenses, angles, but the man underneath the politician was staring at Harry and Daphne with an expression that was not anger or fear but something more devastating. Comprehension. He understood, fully and finally, that he had lost. The Aurors came. Selwyn and his operatives were removed. Pomfrey descended on the room like a force of nature, running diagnostic after diagnostic on Harry and Daphne, her expression shifting from alarm to confusion to something that might have been awe. "The curse is gone," she said. "Not dormant. Gone. The malediction has been completely severed from Miss Greengrass's bloodline. I've never, in all my years," she stopped. Took a breath. "You're healthy, Miss Greengrass. Fully, completely healthy." Daphne sat very still on the edge of the ritual circle, Harry beside her, and she heard the words and understood them and could not, for several long seconds, respond. Because she had spent 6 years preparing for a future that ended in spring, and now spring was just a season, and summer would follow it, and autumn after that, and year after year stretching out ahead of her like a road she'd never expected to walk. "Healthy," she said. The word came out small. Wondering. "Healthy," Pomfrey repeated, and smiled. Astoria hit Daphne like a small, fierce missile, wrapping her arms around her sister and holding on with the grip of someone who'd been terrified for months and was only now letting herself feel it. Tracy was right behind her, tears streaming, laughing and swearing in equal measure. Cyrus Greengrass, who had been contacted by Patronus and had fled to Hogwarts the moment the wards reopened, stood in the doorway of the room of requirement, looked at his daughter, alive and healthy and free, and put his hand over his mouth and said nothing at all, because some moments are too big for words. Harry stepped back. Let them have it. This was their moment, the Greengrass family, finally released from a 600-year nightmare. Ron fell into step beside him. They stood against the wall, watching, and Ron handed him a chocolate bar from somewhere. The man always had chocolate, and they ate it in companionable silence. So, Ron said. Soul bonded to a Slytherin. Apparently. Mum's going to have opinions. Your mum has opinions about everything. True. But these will be loud opinions. With knitting. Ron bit off a square of chocolate. Daphne's good, though. Tough. Smart. Absolutely terrifying when she wants to be. Yeah. You love her. Yeah. She love you. Harry looked across the room. Daphne was holding Astoria, her face buried in her sister's hair, and through the bond, wide open, permanent, theirs, he could feel everything she felt. The relief. The joy. The disbelief. And underneath it all, steady and bright and burning like a fixed star, something aimed directly at him. Yeah, he said. She does. Good. Ron clapped him on the shoulder. Then it was worth it. The aftermath unfolded over days. Selwyn's arrest triggered an investigation that peeled back layers of the Heritage Committee's operations, financial irregularities, unauthorized surveillance, and at the center of it all, the ornate box that had shattered during the ritual. Department of Mysteries analysts identified it as a channeling artifact, designed to collect and store magical energy siphoned through a blood curse. It was 600 years old. It bore the Selwyn family crest. And when its contents were analyzed, they found the magical signatures of 19 Greengrass women, every victim of the curse, stretching back to Alara in 1420. 19 women. 19 lives. 19 mothers and daughters and sisters, harvested for power by a family that had dressed up murder as inheritance. The Wisengamot didn't just dismiss the guardianship petition. They dissolved the Heritage Committee entirely, launched a formal inquiry into the Selwyn family's historical practices, and opened proceedings to strip Marcus Selwyn of his titles and holdings. Neville, who had been coordinating the political coalition, found himself quoted in the Daily Prophet as the conscience of the new Wisengamot. He handled the attention with the quiet, grounded confidence of a man who'd killed a Horcrux with a sword and considered politics a relatively calm affair. Hermione published a paper, because of course she did, on the theoretical implications of soul bond magic, co-authored with Daphne, which was accepted by the Journal of Advanced Magical Theory before the ink was dry. It became the most cited paper in the journal's history within a month. The two of them developed a working relationship that was equal parts mutual respect and competitive intensity, and Harry and Ron learned very quickly to leave the room when they started arguing about runic notation. Cyrus Greengrass's health stabilized. The curse's severance stopped the secondary drain that had been weakening him for years, and while the damage already done was permanent, Pomfrey estimated he had decades ahead of him rather than months. He returned to the manor, reopened the West Wing, and began the slow work of rebuilding a life he'd stopped planning for. Astoria went back to her sixth-year classes with a lightness that her classmates couldn't quite explain. She smiled more. She laughed louder. She hexed a seventh year who made a comment about her sister's bond with Harry Potter, and the hex was so inventive that Flitwick gave her 10 points for creativity before deducting 20 for conduct. Tracy Davis, who had kept Daphne Greengrass's secret since they were 11, who had held her through episodes and researched cures and never once wavered, was seen in the library the week after Halloween reading a book on advanced healing magic. When asked about it, she shrugged and said she was considering career options. Daphne, who knew her better than anyone, bought her the complete set of St. Mungo's entrance exam preparation texts and left them on her bed without a note. And Harry and Daphne. The bond settled over the following weeks into something that was less like a magical phenomenon and more like a fundamental fact. They could feel each other, emotions, physical sensations, the general shape of thoughts, at all times, regardless of distance. The proximity requirement was gone, dissolved by the completed merging, but they found they didn't want distance. Not because the bond demanded closeness, but because they did. They moved through Hogwarts differently now. Not the boy who lived and the Ice Queen. Not a Gryffindor and a Slytherin forced together by circumstance. Just two people, walking side by side, who had chosen each other in the most absolute way magic allowed. The stairs continued. They would always continue. Harry was who he was, and the story of the soul bond had spread across Wizarding Britain like wildfire. But the stairs were different now, not hungry or pitying or afraid, but wondering. Curious. As if people were looking at them and seeing, for the first time, what it looked like when someone chose vulnerability over armor, connection over safety, and love over the comfortable numbness of going it alone. On a Tuesday in November, 3 weeks after the ritual, Harry and Daphne sat by the lake. The water was steel gray under a gray sky, and the air was cold, and the last leaves were falling from the trees, and it was ordinary. Perfectly, beautifully ordinary. "I never thought I'd see November," Daphne said. She said it casually, the way you might mention the weather, but Harry felt the depth of it through the bond, the wonder, the gratitude, the quiet astonishment of a girl experiencing a future she'd been told she'd never have. "December's even better," he said. "There's Christmas. And snow. And Mrs. Weasley's jumpers. Tracy told me about the jumpers. She seemed to think I should be alarmed. They're very warm. That's not reassuring. They're also usually maroon. Now I'm alarmed." He laughed. She smiled, not the ghost of a smile, not the almost smile, but the real thing, wide and unguarded and radiant in a way that made the gray November sky seem irrelevant. "Harry. Yeah. I love you." She said it clearly, simply, without the mask, without the walls, without any of the armor she'd spent 6 years building. She said it the way she said everything that mattered, precisely, deliberately, with full understanding of its weight. Harry looked at her. The girl who'd been prepared to die rather than burden him. The girl who'd fought beside him and fought against him and fought for him, who'd torn down every wall she built because he'd shown her that the view was better without them. The girl whose heartbeat lived behind his ribs, whose magic was woven through his, whose future was tangled up with his in a way that no spell could sever and no force could break. "I love you too," he said. She leaned into him. He put his arm around her. The bond hummed between them, not with magic, not with power, not with the desperate urgency of a curse or the raw intensity of a ritual. With something simpler. Something that had been there since a Tuesday morning in potions class, when a girl's magic had reached across a room and found the one person in the world it was meant to find. The lake was still. The sky was gray. November stretched ahead of them, and December beyond it, and spring, just a season, nothing more, and all the years that followed. They sat together, soul-bound, and watched the world go on.